Hello, everyone. This is Neil. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Neil.
Hey, Mayor Pro Tem. How are you?
How you doing, sir?
Doing good. Feeling all right. Let me get some video action going here.
I gotta check. I gotta change my background.
No, I actually like that. Antonio, how do I do that? Guide me through it real quick.
So this is me like waiting to take a vacation after what, 15, 16 months. So
Yeah,
Switzerland.
we're all having our vacations virtually through our backgrounds. I know, it's ridiculous.
So this is what keeps a smile on my face.
That's just by looking what's behind you, huh?
I just need some goals. That's what it is. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. How's it going, everyone? Greg?
Howdy, howdy.
Hey,
Doing pretty well.
excellent. And Chris there?
How you doing?
Right. I didn't mean you, Chris. I meant the other Chris, but you're included too.
All right.
Good to see you. Director DeAndrea, Maria, how are you? All right. So we do have Member O'Connell emailed me earlier, about a week ago, actually. So she let me know that she won't be coming tonight. She won't be able to participate. So just to be noted, but she's excited to get to see the video and absolutely the information that you provided there too, Maria. So, you know, she's got everything I think she needs to understand what we're doing at this meeting, plus moving forward as well. But if there's anything else, I'll forward it to her. So, all right. I didn't hear anything from Member Lewis, so I'm not sure if he's joining us or not. I don't see him at the time online. So it's a little after 6, so I think we can move forward, get the meeting started here. Do we do this like you usually there, Director DeAndrea? Do we start the meeting? And I don't know, is it Brittany who's the new assistant?
Actually, I'd like to introduce Michelle Chavez. She's our new
Okay.
permanent business support specialist. There she is.
Oh, hi,
Hi,
Michelle.
Michelle.
Welcome.
Hi, everybody.
She'll be supporting ETAC going forward. She's going to observe tonight. So I'll take like the role and do any motions that we have. And then hopefully next meeting, she'll kind of take over those duties.
Great. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah. So with that there, Maria, do you want me to go ahead and bring the agenda up on the screen and then we'll go from there? Okay,
That'd be great. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Okay, let me know when you guys can see that there. Actual last ones here. Okay. Is it up there yet or not? Okay, you can see it. Great. Thanks. All right, let's call to order this meeting, the Inglewood Transportation Advisory Committee meeting. Today's date is Thursday, May 13, 2021. The time is 6:05 p.m. I am Chair Sarno, and the first thing is that I've approved the agenda previously, but we'll have our roll call at this time. So Director DeAndrea, lead us through that. I think you're muted there, Maria.
Sorry about that. Member Dietrich? Oh, Chris, you're muted. Here we go.
I think your mic's not working,
Oh,
or at least I couldn't hear. There we go.
you're there. Member
Yeah.
Knudsen.
Present.
Member Lewis? Member O'Connell, and Chair Sarno.
Present.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Director. So we'll move on. And first item of business here is the approval of minutes. This is from our April 8th ETAC meeting minutes. So if the committee has had an opportunity to look at those minutes, scroll down to that. And if there's any comments for that regarding the minutes, please offer them now before we memorialize them. I don't hear much, so that feels like consensus that these minutes are acceptable.
Move to accept the minutes as presented.
Do we have a second?
Yes, I will second that.
Very good. Any further discussion on this? I don't see any at this time, so we'll move forward on a vote.
Member Diedrich,
Aye.
Member Knudsen,
Aye.
Member Lewis, Member O'Connell, and Chair Sarno.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Thank you, Director DeAndrea. We'll move back here to the agenda. And following the approval of minutes, we're moving on to recognition of public comment. We have received a comment from a Mr. Chris Hoagland, who's online with us today. Mr. Hoagland, how are you?
Oh, very well, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loud and
Great.
clear. Excellent. So, Mr. Hoagland, you submitted a comment, I believe it was to Mayor Pro Tem Sierra, to the city in general. The committee did receive your comment, and it was in regards to the Hollywood style curb. I'm taking from it that perhaps you're not approving of the curb, or do you want to walk us through what your issue is?
Well, it's a pretty pedestrian hostile assembly. And as a consequence, one can see pedestrians out in the street because it's really inconvenient, particularly when there's more than one person walking. And it occurred to me that there might be a simple way to encourage people to move back onto the sidewalk. And that would be to put a stripe on the asphalt next to the walkway, curb, gutter assembly, and encourage people to park their cars on the asphalt side of the stripe. It would be a very cost-effective way to widen that sidewalk so that people could walk side by side, for example, or walk with a dog even. That style of sidewalk is further compromised by vehicles with large mirrors, which have become quite common, and it's really, I think, really antithetical to a pedestrian friendly environment. And if in fact that seems like something that might generate your interest, my neighborhood would probably be a very good place to try to experiment with that. I live in Arapahoe Acres, and we have a very good local communication network where everybody's tied in to our homeowners association with emails and their frequent newsletters and so forth. And if the city does not have a traffic engineer on retainer, it might be interesting to check out School of Mines. They do have a traffic engineering subspecialty for civil engineers. And it's quite possible that we could get enough interest from one of their undergraduates, let's say, to do a thesis on an experiment like this. But I think it's important to quantify the results if the city is going to spend any money on it, and to find out if in fact this is something that interests anybody, or if it produces anything like the results that we would like to have. And so I think that the accessibility of my neighborhood might make this a good prospect if you had any interest in pursuing this idea.
So, Mr. Hoagland, you did bring up that you reside in Arapahoe Acres there. thank you for giving us some idea of the neighborhood and where you're at and understanding maybe the situation there on those streets. I'm curious though, do you have any idea in terms of the width of this actual sidewalk? Is that maybe 2 to 3 feet? Is that what it is? Some of those mountable curbs, if you will, are much wider than others, and some of them are, you know, smaller. It just depends. Do you have you taken any dimensions on what those are?
Sure,
there?
yeah, so the walking surface outside my house is about 30 inches wide, and if you were to include the entire assembly, including gutter, curb, and walkway, it goes out to about 64. It's my understanding that the people who think about this stuff seem to feel that a 5-foot sidewalk is really sort of the minimal dimension for comfortable pedestrian access, and so that would effectively accomplish that.
I would say that I agree with you in that. I think probably when you're doing a new build and new developments and so on, that's perhaps something that is achievable. I'm not certain in, you know, way back when the city, when it was built, the Arapahoe Acres and so on, if that was a standard or not. And I don't want to speak to that right now. Perhaps this is something that the city can jump in on and enlighten us a little bit on what that is. And I know in terms of right of way, those also establish the width of the roadway and therefore the potential width of sidewalks and all of that. So, but I don't know, Director DeAndrea or anybody from the city, if they want to speak to that in terms of the typical situation for those mountable sidewalks.
Yeah, just one question, if I could. Mr.
Sure.
Hoagland, was the intent to have somebody walk on the regular sidewalk and then in the gutter area and then have the buffer, or walk in the asphalt portion as well?
Well, I'm trying to keep people off the asphalt
Okay.
because that puts them in traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal would be to move the vehicles into the asphalt so that the entire concrete surface of the curb assembly would be available to pedestrians.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So typically our streets, including the ones in Arapahoe Acres, are 36 feet from curb line to curb line. So that's the gutter, you know, the indentation where it starts to rise up from that gutter. So coming in, let's say 2 feet on either side would reduce that to 32 feet of traveling surface minus the width for the parking, which is typically 8 feet, which would leave us 20 feet of clear distance, if you will, which still meets fire requirements. So they require 20-foot clear. So we could go up to 2 feet if we were to consider something like that. So imagine the very edge of where the asphalt meets the concrete. We could go 2 feet in from there on either side if we were to consider something like this. So the edge of the tires might still be near that white line, and the mirrors might hang into that 2 foot zone, but to Mr. Hoagland's point, they wouldn't be in the concrete area.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable solution. What are your thoughts on that, Mr. Hoagland?
Well, I'm not sure that we would take as much as 2 feet. So essentially, I think it would really only be about 1.5 feet or 18 inches from the curb to the edge of the gutter portion. And an ancillary benefit would be, it's my understanding that one of the strategies that traffic engineers use to induce traffic calming or slow traffic down is to narrow the street so that the drivers would normally respond to narrower streets by driving more slowly. So I think there are potentially ancillary benefits as well.
I would just add that Director DeAndrea, from what you had suggested there with the 2 foot and that 2 foot, you know, we can discuss that, what's reasonable, whether it's 1.5 feet or so on. But certainly the idea of those mirrors hanging out in the section, what would be the gutter section, would absolutely defeat the purpose of what Mr. Hoagland is saying, is having you know, a pedestrian possibly using the gutter there to walk while someone else walks on the sidewalk. So, you know, it would probably, in my estimation, have to be at least a minimum of a foot in order to have that room from the lip of the gutter, if you will, to the stripe, to provide for that mirror right there that could potentially be hanging out there. So, but you know, 2 feet is what you mentioned there, and certainly that's something that could be vetted in terms of what the correct offset would be from the lip of the pan right there, I think. Yeah. Has there been anywhere in the city where we've applied this kind of striping or?
No, we'd have to research that a little bit more. I think it really would be, you know, this is not a typical application. So doing that edge stripe, but, and then we really would have to get buy-in from the neighborhood. So it may not, Sergeant McKay couldn't be here tonight, but we can certainly follow up with him and ask his opinion if it's enforceable. If, let's say, somebody just didn't conform, could they be ticketed? You know, I don't know that answer, but we probably want to do a little bit more research on, you know, is it in conformance with the manual of uniform traffic control devices? Is there maybe a temporary or interim application that we could do to try it out? You know, maybe it's not the whole neighborhood, but like a loop or something. And then see, you know, reach out to the community in that neighborhood specifically and see what they think about it.
I think it's an interesting problem. I remember at one of the first ETAC meetings that I attended, there was a woman who was, I think, part of the committee at the time who is blind. And she was talking about some of the difficulty that she runs into when cars are parked up onto the sidewalk even. And I think that these like slanted curbs or Hollywood curbs do not necessarily encourage that, but they make it more likely that somebody is going to roll up on the curb as they park or get closer to it than if we had more squared off curbs. And I've definitely encountered that, you know, this experience that you're talking about, Mr. Hoagland, of you're going down the sidewalk, and especially it seems like on a tall truck with our crowned roads and the big wide mirrors, that the mirror can take up what feels like half of the sidewalk. And, you know, with the sidewalks already being relatively narrow, it's taking out a lot of space so that the sidewalk isn't really all that useful. And I've bumped into mirrors as I'm walking, and I just try to imagine, like, for somebody who is blind walking along, that would be such a challenging experience, because you're not going to find a mirror with your cane probably, so it would just hit you out of nowhere. And so yeah, it seems like coming up with some sort of a solution would be really beneficial. I really appreciate you walking us through those calculations on the space and what the requirements are, Director DeAndrea. And yeah, it definitely seems like something that you know, some more research would be valuable, and maybe a trial to try to understand this could be a good thing to do. So thanks everybody for your thoughts and for trying to come up with solutions to this.
Director DeAndrea, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Mr. Groff if he has any thoughts from an operations or installation standpoint.
Not yet. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around what we're talking about. I think I got a good idea. I would love to sit down and chat some more about this.
You know, one thing I'm curious about is just thinking out loud, if that 2-foot offset from the gutter lip of the gutter is there, as we're just kicking around here and talking through this, would typical people, motorists parking there, would they be somewhat confused by this? It would almost be kind of something that we'd have to either put some sort of signs, at least temporarily, or something in that capacity, so they understand that the intention is for them to stay within that solid or stripe line that's there too. Just something else there too, because again, it, like you're pointing out, Greg, if you have a vehicle that is encroaching then into the sidewalk area over there, all it needs to be is one for somebody who's thinks they have a clear zone, and then all of a sudden they're just smacking right into it. So the idea is to get everybody kind of trained up or schooled up and conditioned that this is what that stripe means. You know, park right here. That's the extent of where your tires should be parked, or, you know, encroaching there. So that's just something else to consider. And I think that could probably be achieved, like I said, with some sort of temporary signage, or maybe even some flyers that can be passed around on that particular street.
Here, Sarna, do you mind if I jump in?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I didn't see who raised their hand first. So is that you, Mayor Pro Tem Sierra? Go ahead.
I raised my hand, but if
Okay.
there's somebody else that had it before me,
I didn't catch that, but go ahead. Go ahead. You've got the floor.
No, so I guess my question would be for Director DeAndrea on this. So, and Mr. Hoagland, thank you very much for bringing this to our attention. Director DeAndrea, if I remember correctly, I think we are researching which sidewalks around the city are non-conforming, or at least not to proper lengths or widths, I guess I should say in this case. Would Arapahoe Acres, or am I correct in understanding that we do have a budget item, or at least we're looking to identify what sidewalks are not to the proper length or width?
That's correct. We've done an inventory of missing sidewalks, like just segments where there are none. And then also ones that are less than ADA guidelines, which is 42 inches. So in these Hollywood curbs, we measure that from that point. Basically, the flat portion should be 42 inches to meet ADA guidelines.
Yeah, so I do like that this came up, because this could be a potential solution to some of the issues that we're encountering. I know that we've had citizens come and speak to some of these sidewalks that, especially like west of Broadway. The last that I remember was around the new development that's going to occur around Winslow Cranes. That those are shortened sidewalks. I believe it's what's that street? It's not Elati, it's Galapagos, I believe it is. But anyway, but I do like the fact that there may be a potential solution that we can look at. Obviously, it's still early. I'd like to see a trial or something of those, or at least discussion at that point. But yeah, I'd like to see potential solutions to some of these issues that we're seeing across the city.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Hoagland, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to mention that I didn't envision that this would be necessarily enforced, but rather voluntary. And that would be a consequence of the excellent communication network that we have in our neighborhood, and the other opportunities for communication that have come up in this IT era. And so I just didn't, I felt that it would be much better just to offer an opportunity for volunteer compliance rather than ticketing and so forth. But I think the code as it exists today requires that you be within 18 inches of the curb. And somehow if we could temporarily suspend that so that this experiment could go forward without people getting ticketed would be terrific.
Thank you for that, Mr. Hoagland. Member Diedrich, you had a comment.
Yes, thank you. A few questions, few comments here. I'm happy that we're looking at this, and I think thank you, Mr. Hoagland, for bringing this up as an item, and it's something that is definitely worth some consideration. I liked some of the ideas that you had about potentially, utilizing some outside resources that could be mutually beneficial to attempt some sort of a trial or test of something like this, especially if you've got, a block, even just a block or a couple of blocks to try it out that you can compare to each other or something like that. And so I'm kind of interested in, are there, if we just put some stripes on the ground, what really is the ultimate safety issue that might arise from that? There might not be a whole lot, with the cars moving out, just to voluntarily see who parks within those lines. If we put them down just as sort of an experiment on a block, if some people are open to trying that. So I think that's an interesting idea, especially from the academic side. I thank you for bringing that up as a potential option. And to Mayor Pro Tem Sierra's comments as well, there are some of these areas like west of Cherokee and north of Hampton, they're putting in all these apartments and all these developments. A lot of those areas have these, smaller sidewalks as well. If we're doing an academic thing, that might also be a good example of something that might potentially be higher traffic compared to something like over in the neighborhood that Mr. Hoagland lives. I've walked through that neighborhood. I've walked down the middle of the street because the sidewalks are skinny and cars park on the side. And there's a lot of other neighborhoods like that around too. So I'm glad we're looking at this. The replacement of the gutters and the sidewalks, is expensive, and there's a lot that has to go on with this. So I think this is a creative solution, maybe some markings. And so I'm looking at the picture, and I want to make sure I'm thinking about sort of where the lines might go appropriately. So maybe a question for Maria, but if we were to, when you talked about it being 2 feet out from each side of the curb, are you talking about the low point in the gutter where the water runs down, basically? So if you were to go 2 feet out, it might only be, a foot into the asphalt portion of the road out of the gutter. Is that correct? Or
No, so it'd be like that edge where the concrete of the gutter meets the asphalt of the road. So if you imagine that joint right there, we could go up to 2 feet from that point out.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. So that'd give the full width of the concrete in the gutter line, plus then that 2 foot buffer, which we could make less. We could make that a foot and a half, whatever.
Mhm.
You know what I can do here very quickly here, if I could jump in, I can bring up, I did look into, and this is, of course, this is a CDOT M&S standard here, but it does show the profile of what would be the of a mountable sidewalk here. So give me a second here. Let me just try to bring this up here. Let's see.
While Neil's
So-
pulling that up
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, Maria, if we were to have a block in that neighborhood, let's just say 1 block, or, there's a couple of areas, maybe they could do a circle around a, city block in there or something, or maybe just 1 street. But to do something like this, do we have to get a homeowner approval for something like this? I know there would have to be some kind of notification, but if we were going to do this, what would that look like from that side of things?
Yeah, I think we definitely want to work with the neighborhood association because, again, we want conformance. We don't want to have to do, enforcement. That's not the intent. We'd really want people to buy into the idea. So I don't know that we'd necessarily need like some sort of approval from a signature standpoint, but I think we'd definitely want, buy-in from the neighborhood, kind of informed consent that let's at least try this.
Okay, and it sounds like Mr. Hoagland may be our champion in the neighborhood for that. So
I'd be happy to coordinate because we do have, as I said, very good communication here.
Great. All right, thanks. Back to you, Neil.
Thank you, Member Diedrich. Yeah, so let's see here. I know that was a mountable gutter there. And again, I don't know if this is something that the city has already their own standard on that. So I don't want to preclude what we're doing here in Inglewood with what's shown here with CDOT, but just for the sake of just showing right here, this is what would be the lip right here, Chris, of what we were just discussing here earlier, and going 2 foot out, if you can see where my hand's going out, and then placing a stripe here.
I don't think you'd have to go that wide. I think right at the edge of the interface of concrete and asphalt.
You're suggesting right here, Mr. Hoagland?
That's right.
Just kind of right here on there. Yeah.
That gives you 64 inches.
Yeah, I mean, typically, and I'm not certain, again, it could be either a 1 foot pan or a 2 foot pan. Typically, if it's spill, it's 1 foot. If it's catch, it's 2 foot. I'm assuming it's probably 2 foot, but I'm not certain. So, but that is, again, it's possible. This is if just, again, playing this out, if you have a vehicle that's parked here, their tires are here, and their mirror extends maybe, I want to say 6 to 8 inches into this. Still provides a little bit here within this 2-foot pan for a pedestrian to walk. Is that what you're thinking, Mr. Hoagland?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, and that's again, this is, we're all just walking through this. This is new, and I think this is a kind of a good element of discussion, if you will, on where that stripe should be, should we pursue that. And I would think that the first thing that you brought up, Director D'Andrea, was actually considering the right-of-way there. And not all streets have this same right-of-way. Many of them are typical, especially in the same neighborhoods. But again, looking into the MUTCD, understanding that, well, the fire trucks need a minimum of 20 feet, so on, ensuring that we're not encroaching. And as you alluded to, Mr. Hoagland, we want to narrow things down as a kind of a traffic calming measure, but there are a certain minimum width required for 2 vehicles to pass as well, too. So all of this plays into just understanding every street, every neighborhood, and what's typical there and what can be achieved. So that's what I'm driving home with there on that as well. So. Yeah.
I think it could be interesting if we're looking at it academically to maybe try it in a couple spots and see what works better potentially. I don't know what the pedestrian traffic is like in that neighborhood, but it is a unique older neighborhood that people like to go through, and so I think that's interesting to be able to have people have a safe place to walk through there, especially neighborhoods like that. And if the residents are open to trying something like this out, I think let's give it a shot, as long as we can check the right boxes and make sure it's safe and we don't have any legal issues.
Yeah. Very good. And it is striping season now too. So you've hit us at the right time, Mr. Hoagland. The temperature is coming up, and it's so but again, yeah, that's this is something that, thank you again for bringing to our attention on that. And it's another tool in the toolbox that maybe we can pretty much accommodate what would be people and pedestrians, and because I do see a lot of that as well too, where if it's too narrow and you've got 2 people, they'll opt to go in the street. And especially if it's not a particularly very busy neighborhood or busy street, they'll opt to do that. So this would be one way to kind of drive the pedestrians back to the sidewalk, and creating some safety around that as well too. So, okay, Member Diedrich, you have another comment?
Yeah, just curious, we're talking about putting a line on the cement here with paint. Just so everybody's on the same page, the question for Maria, what color would that line be on the pavement?
It'd be white.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah. So is this something then that the city will, I guess, we can entertain and collaborate with the committee as well? Or what are your thoughts on that, Director D'Andrea, on our next steps?
Yeah, absolutely. We can do some more research and then come back at your June meeting and present some maybe findings and recommendations.
Member Diedrich?
Yeah, I'm curious, it sounds, we don't have everybody on, the police, of course, not represented today, but it sounds like there's not any major impediments to trying something like this potentially. There's obviously a budget associated with it and some community outreach and stuff, but I'm just curious if it might make sense for Mr. Hoagland to maybe work with some neighbors to identify a street or an area that they would be comfortable trying something like this, with the potential that the city may be able to support something, a test like this as well. I would hate for them to lose a couple of months of the summer season, which is, even more important walking in the neighborhoods around here. So I guess that's kind of a question for Maria, but also Mr. Hoagland, if that would make sense for him to do something like that.
Oh, I'd be pleased to do that. Just let me know who I need to contact to coordinate.
Yep, that'd be me, Mr. Hoagland. So we'll be in touch.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to join your meeting, and I hope we can make some progress.
Before you jump off here, we do have Member Lewis. He's joined our meeting as well too, and he has a comment. Raise his hand. Member Lewis, welcome. Patrick? Hey, Patrick, I don't know if you're muted or not. I see your hands up, but we can't hear you. If you've got. Still can't hear you right now, Patrick. Well, I think he might be experiencing some technical difficulty, so we'll circle back to Member Lewis here.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, can now. There you go.
Yeah, sorry, I'm traveling. I'm in New York, but I just wanted to, I've been listening in on the whole time, and I appreciated Member Dietrich's comments about that, and I think a trial run might be really beneficial to get this going, you know? Like, let's go.
Okay. Yep.
So,
That's what we're
sorry
doing,
about
and
that.
we've got, yeah, no, appreciate it, Member Lewis. So yeah, and I think this is where we're at. We're kind of pivoting towards that. I think Mr. Hoagland here, you understand now that who to contact here at the city. Director DeAndrea will be kind of your liaison, and if there's anything else, feel free to contact anybody at the city, and certainly the ETAC as well too. So you found our ear, and we're totally supportive of this. So thank you again for joining. If there's anything else, just let us know.
Thank you so much. I sure appreciate your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Hoagland. Okay. Nothing else on that matter right now. We can move on. Okay, seeing no hands at this time, I'll continue on. Let me get back to the agenda. Okay. Still under public comments, and we do have a written comment that was received from a Ms. Christine Brinker regarding state grant opportunity. I did allude to that at our last meeting at the very end, and Ms. Brinker was provided us this email there too, and really gave us some insight on some grant opportunities there, and wanted to bring that to the city's attention, which we greatly appreciated there too. And I did respond to Ms. Brinker saying that I think that the city has done an excellent job, I would say exceptionally here within the last several years, to chase these opportunities. I think as a committee, we've seen that. But that is my opinion, and I'll just open that up for discussion there. And Director DeAndrea, is that, you want to speak to this first?
Just to let the committee know that we are pursuing both of these grant opportunities that were listed here. So our newly formed Downtown Development Authority, our director is pursuing the smaller one, which is Grant Opportunity 2. And then Public Works is working on Grant Opportunity 1, which is up to $2 million.
Excellent.
And I believe the deadline is like June 21st. So we've got a little over a month to pull those grants together.
Excellent. You know, I would say that it feels that any project, proposed project that the city's undertaking, I think that the committee comes together to immediately ask what the funding source is, and of course understand, hey, have you guys reached out? Is this part of any sort of a grant opportunity in doing that? And I think part of what Ms. Brinker alluded to here is that, this is really gets us as a city to get farther along in what we're trying to achieve with many projects. And of course, any funding that we have only enables us to meet those goals. So yeah, very much supportive of all that. And I think that there's quite a bit more probably coming down the line, although I don't know the specifics of that and on that, but I would say through Dr. Cog and some other sources, that now's a really good opportunity to keep our radar open for these kind of opportunities as well.
I totally agree.
Thanks, Member Lewis. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Member Diedrich, Member Canadison, you guys' thoughts on these grant opportunities? And
I think it's great to be looking into as many of these opportunities as we can. And I know we lost a resource that worked really hard for us on some similar types of things. And we talked about the sidewalks earlier. There are other grant opportunities for something like that as well. I'm definitely in favor of that. And if there's anything we can do to help.
yeah.
Yeah, we'll likely, once we have the application pulled together, so probably be perfect timing for the June meeting is to bring that back and walk the committee through that.
Great. Yeah, and I think for the record, I believe that the city, as well as ETAC, has responded to Ms. Brinker as well, to letting her know that we appreciate her correspondence and just alerting us to these opportunities, grant applications, and so on. So it's nice to have the city, citizens looking out for the city, I guess, in that sense. So we appreciate that. Yeah. All right. If nothing else on this topic, we'll move on to the next one, which I believe, let me see here. Yes, it was a letter from Mr. Tom Sanders regarding Floyd Avenue and Floyd Place traffic. So for that there, and it appears that I think it was perhaps maybe 2 meetings ago where Mr. Sanders joined us and gave us his concerns about the people cutting off of University onto East Floyd Place, and his concerns revolving that. He also submitted a letter which the city responded to as well. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, Director DeAndrea, but he's responded to what the city had sent out, and these are his responses.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, great. So what I'm getting from Mr. Sanders here is that he's seeking some solutions, again, in terms of traffic calming and some other recommendations, enforcement and the like, as well as looking at on University Boulevard about slowing traffic to the posted limits. So I think he's seeking different approaches to trying to limit the amount of cut through, as well as perhaps slowing traffic, the speed of traffic down on what would be University, and of course through the neighborhoods there to make things safe. So I don't believe Mr. Sanders is joining us here today too. I just want to reiterate that, if that's, unless I'm mistaken. Have we received any indication that he'll be joining us today? I have not.
No, I did get a chance to talk to him on Tuesday though.
Okay.
So
great.
I went through with him, some of his specific concerns. So, and talked to Sergeant McCabe. So they're going to start that enforcement on Floyd Place and Floyd Avenue, as well as University, next week. So they are going to go out and start some enforcement. I told them that at this time, we do not install speed humps. So I know that was one of his recommendations, but we are going to be starting on the neighborhood traffic calming program. So that's a written program to talk about how do we do more traffic calming. And so this could be a good project to consider as that document is developed. So that may end up with options for traffic calming, but things like, narrowing down the road in certain places, perhaps speed humps in certain locations that doesn't influence emergency vehicles. And so he was quite pleased with that direction. We've also been working with Arapahoe County. They're updating their transportation master plan. And so we're also going to look at or include in that the potential for a northbound left turn lane at Floyd Avenue, which is also one of Mr. Sanders' suggestions. And I think the committee, we had talked about that when he came to that meeting.
Yeah.
It's kind of a follow-up to evaluate that and see if that's physically possible.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, very good. So I'm glad to see that, the interaction there, and I appreciate you letting us know, Director DeAndrea, that in fact you had been in touch with Mr. Sanders as well too. So I didn't know if this was something that you wanted, these correspondences, you wanted to bring it to our attention and have ETAC respond, but certainly it feels like you've reached out, you've made a connection with him, and there's some things moving forward here at this time. So I don't know if there's anything else from the committee, if they have had any other questions or comments regarding this issue. Okay. Got a shake of the head from Member Diedrich, which is good. And then I can't see. Now I could see it, Greg, so I got to scroll back and forth. So thumbs up from him. Okay, very good. So I guess, oh, go ahead. I don't know if it was there. Member Lewis, you good?
Oh yeah, no, I'm looking. Sorry.
Sorry. Well, Director DeAndrea, thanks again for putting this on the agenda, keeping us informed, keeping the committee informed of this, because if there's obviously something going, and Mr. Sanders brought this to the attention of the committee, so it's great that you're continuing to include us and to see what the outcome of this is, to hopefully satisfy all parties. So thank you for doing that.
And he did copy you, Chair Sarno, on the letters too. And I wanted to make sure you were aware of that, and that you were able to see those.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Well, we'll look forward to that and see what's maybe some enforcement and some of the things you've suggested here will help kind of change the game over there for Mr. Sanders. And so we're looking forward to seeing that, some of those results. Okay, nothing else on this. We'll move on to the next topic. Okay. And
excuse me, Chair Sarno, there was
Sure.
a third item added, another email that looks like it didn't show up on your agenda here.
okay,
So if you want to stop sharing, I can pull that up real quick here.
sure.
Yeah, this was a late addition. I had forgotten that I had told Miss Harkness that we were going to add this. Can you guys see that?
Can you enlarge
Yep.
it just a
Yeah,
bit?
make it bigger.
Yeah.
Oops.
Works for me.
So, or Chair Center, what we'll do is make sure that this gets included
Yeah.
with, as we move forward with the East Dartmouth traffic calming project, to
Yeah,
make sure that these comments are noted. And as we've talked about, this will involve, that project will do some significant outreach to the community as well as public input again. So, but I know she wanted to make the committee aware of her concerns.
all right, well, very good. Oh, Member Diedrich raised his hand.
Yeah, I saw this letter and I did a quick look down Dartmouth, and I think there's a valid concern, but I'm not sure how many people it's going to affect. And I wasn't sure when you guys are looking at this, you know, if there were going to be any places where, you know, potentially there could be some on-street car parking if there was, you know, a section or a block or two that potentially had houses that didn't have any other access. You know, the trash portion of this was sort of interesting to me. We've been talking about alley trash pickup quite a bit here with everything that's going on, and you know, this is somebody that potentially doesn't have an alley either, so I don't know how that would work. But I also, you know, it's a small number of people that may be affected, but I appreciate you guys taking a look at what the options might be for those types of things.
Will do, yeah.
Thank you, Member Diedrich, for that. Yeah. Well, and I would say that I think that we, in our conversation with this, which I think was brought to our attention by Member O'Connell, that we had discussed that as well too. It wasn't something forgotten in terms of that, but it was just something that we acknowledged that there was a potential for perhaps some residents that didn't have perhaps a garage or some access there, and street parking was their only or closest viable space to them parking and in terms of access. So we appreciate any comments from the community though, and of course to highlight what their situation is, and we appreciate that. So, but that was something that was, I think, discussed at our meeting as well too, if I recall. Yeah. Very good. So Director DeAndrea, you said that you will include this in the meeting minutes. Is that, or I'm sorry, could you say that again, what you said, that you'll include this?
Yeah, we're completing the process of the intergovernmental agreement with CDOT, and that will allow us to move forward to work with a higher engineering consultant to help us with this project.
I see.
And so we'll make sure to note these comments and accumulate them as we move forward with the project.
Gotcha.
And share
So,
that with that consultant.
Great. So everything that's in regards to the Dartmouth bike lanes there, you're compiling all that for submission to the consultant. Understood. Great. All right. Well, we appreciate that. Appreciate Ms. Harkness for her correspondence there too, and we'll add that as you mentioned. Noted. All right. Moving back to the agenda. All right, we're moving on to old business, and we have our first item there is the bike share program. This item was brought to us courtesy of Member Lewis, and I think Member Lewis, you wanted to kind of circle back on this. We had talked about this, who knows how long ago as a committee, and your question was whether there was any resolution on this, and
Absolutely, yeah.
That's way back in my memory bank. So I don't know if you want to speak to that.
And that's something that's been very important to me.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate a little bit on what your thoughts are on that in terms of where we were?
I know originally we were talking about the bike / scooter share program, and we're going to model it based on Lone Tree and Englewood and Denver, and then other like-minded cities. But it seems like it kind of fell off the radar, and I didn't know, it didn't seem to have any feet to it. And I know that was something that was really important to member Knadison and myself as well. And so I just wanted to circle back to see if we needed to continue it, or if there was a decision that was already made to pause it, or I don't know. So that's it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like we really, to me, it seemed as if there was a total influx of a lot of those scooters, and that kind of got our attention and kind of drove that conversation at the time. And I don't know if it was because of COVID or what have you, or maybe Denver changed some of their regulations and so forth, but it felt like I'd been seeing less of that in terms of the scooters and so on, at least recently. I don't, this is again just kind of my optics on that, but so maybe that was one reason it fell off. Yeah, go ahead. Member Lewis, sure.
I agree, and I think there's been this whole discussion about lopping in scooters with bikes, and maybe I feel that we should parse them out, and maybe we could have bikes and not scooters, because it seems like the scooters is what has been raised by community members as being dangerous and not something that the community really wants. Mm-hmm. But my discussions with people in the community is that whole proverbial last mile, the bike share program really does work. And it really also accelerates and, adds to the value of using the light rail. And that's something that's important to me as a team member.
Yeah, certainly I support that. And I think that, the aim of the committee in terms of our multimodal capacity is to support and really accommodate as much as possible. And the bike share program is something that is certainly geared towards that, to helping out with that. So, I don't know. I don't want to put member Knadison on the spot here and call him our bike share savant or anything like that. But I know that, Greg's got quite a bit of knowledge for all things, as well as member O'Connell, who's not here too. So do you have anything to offer to this, member Knadison?
Yeah, sure. So, from my perspective, my memory of the history of this subject with our committee is that when there was a period, and I think it was the summer of 2019, where bike shares and scooter shares were just like dropping their equipment on street corners, and regardless of what the regulations were. And then there was also, I think, the OFO bike program, which was done in close coordination with the city of Aurora. And that was much more of a controlled operation, and they had protocols about if a bike is abandoned for a certain amount of time, it can be picked up and relocated and all that stuff. And I believe that they also had like a bond that they had with the city to pay for any equipment that was left and considered to be essentially littering, which seemed like a good protection. And I think that we had a moment where if we had tried to court some of the sharing programs, we could have maybe got them interested in leaving some of their equipment in Englewood. But I think that moment passed, and that we didn't have, like a strong enough interest or a quick enough action to really draw them in. And that at this point, our city is just not quite dense enough for it to make sense for them. And so what I've seen on the maps is that Englewood is out of the area where you're allowed to leave bikes or scooters for most of the services. I haven't looked in a while, but it seems like Evans or maybe even Yale on the north side is about as
Yeah.
far south as they're allowed to go. So I think it's, at this point, it's sort of out of our hands, and it's really up to those services whether they would want to move here. And I think that, between the pandemic and other stuff going on, they're just not really expanding all that fast right now. So we'll probably have to, wait another couple of years or so, or another year or two, and just be aware that this is something that we should be ready for when it comes. But I don't think that there's a moment for us for us being the city of Englewood to try to take an action on like what kind of policy we want to have if and when they do show up. I think that there are some things we need to consider, like wanting to have that bond up front, wanting to have a policy about if a bike is left inappropriately, should public works folks be picking it up and giving it back to them, and making a debit against the bond for that work that they're doing essentially for free, different things like that. Advertising about where they can and can't be parked. I think that when we first researched this, I feel like scooters are not super regulated, that electric bikes, I think, have regulations right now in the state of, like the combination of the laws of Colorado and Englewood. I think that bikes are more clearly regulated than scooters. So we might have to change or update our code or our regulations to match that. But I just think that like there's not necessarily anything we can do now until the programs are interested in moving their stuff down here.
Well, Member Knudsen, I remember a couple of years ago, this is something that was on your agenda as well. And this is on my agenda right now, in that we don't need to be reactive depending on what other cities or communities are doing. Isn't this, this is something that I want to continue to push forward.
That sounds good. I'm in favor of it. I feel like, the best thing from my perspective, the best thing we could do is just reach out to those companies and see what they have to say. And then other than that, it seems like they are more excited about leaving their, or like allowing their equipment to travel into spaces where, where they're welcome. So the more that we can do projects like the bike boulevards and protected bike lanes, stuff like that, I think that would make it more likely that programs would be interested in having their equipment used in our city.
I understand.
Yeah, and I would add to that I was thinking that once we really in earnest begin the redevelopment or civic center and that whole corridor there, that's certainly a space that would be great opportunity for a bike share. Just as in many cities, the focal point or downtown or whatever you want to call it there, and that becomes a great launching pad for this kind of a program, and then it just takes off there and you see it throughout the community. So I think that's something else to think about there too. So yeah. So thanks, Member Lewis, for bringing that back to our attention for those of us who may have forgotten there too. So I think
it's something that's important to me, and I really want that to be documented as something to be on the agenda for future recommendations. Sure.
Well, and that's one thing too. And if there's something that whoever wants to take it upon themselves, but even if you want to go ahead and maybe look into that a little bit, see what kind of approaches we can take or what avenues that would be available to the city to kind of get that going too. If you want to do that and bring it to our attention, that would be.
I think what we need is buy-in from city council. Like we got buy-in from lowering the speed limit. That's what happened. Done. It was done.
Okay. Well, I think, that's something, if we get a little bit more information at the table, that's something I think that we can ramp it up and then make that presentation there.
Okay.
So. Any other, Ms. Member Diedrich, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm just curious, there's a few different types of these bicycle share programs out there, and some of them are independent, more like the scooters are, and some of them are more part of the municipal government, funded and more heavily regulated and maintained by them. And I don't know how they're run in other communities, but I would be curious to see, what types of those programs have been more successful. Patrick, I agree with, and I think this is it's something we definitely were discussing, and we're kind of at a time right now where we have an opportunity to get ahead of this sort of thing in our community and be in favor of it for when it comes back. But we also are at a time where, with it, I think it would be, I would hate for us to try and turn something on immediately or in the next few months and have low ridership and have it not work out and sort of like miss an opportunity by being a little premature on something like this as well. And so I have a little hesitancy for pushing really hard on something like this, but I am a proponent of this for sure. I would use this all the time, whether it was the scooters, I use those. Back in 2019, we were talking about this stuff as well as the bikes. So I'm still in favor of this sort of thing as well. So I appreciate you bringing it back up because it's something we need to be aware of and know that it's going to come back. And we had, some pretty deep discussions, you're right, where we went in and we talked with the city attorney a little bit about this. And we talked about how do we need to amend some codes to be able to have these sorts of things in town. And it's been, not a topic for a while. And so I appreciate you bringing it back up because, it's something that we can also get ahead of. But, I don't know if we need to be a first mover on something like this, putting a new feature like this in town in the next, few months. But also, I think people are going to use it. And there's a reason we were talking about it before. So thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah, but why not? Why can't we be first movers? And also, I just want to add that the scooters and the bikes, they're not attached. We could have one or the other. And I think that based on our discussions, the scooters, it was realized that it's really dangerous. And, there's bike share programs. And Member Addison, come on. I know you want this. I know you do. So this is something that this is something that's dear to my heart, and I want to continue to discuss it and push it forward and not just be, I brought it up for old discussion topics and, blah, blah. So that's it.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of this idea in general. I just think that it's up to the businesses who have the property, who have the programs, that whether or not they want to expand into the city. So I feel like that's the first point, is figuring out what would it take for them to want to reach out to Inglewood. And my sense is it's all the other things that we work on about, like the bike lanes on Dartmouth, Bike Boulevard, right? All having, like right now we've got a whole bunch of disconnected elements of a network. We don't have a really good connected bike network throughout the city. If we had a network where, Dartmouth could connect to Logan, could connect to Quincy or Oxford or whatever, then that would be more appealing to them. But until we have that, I feel like my guess, and I haven't verified this, but my guess is that they're not going to be as interested.
Okay. Yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. True. Okay.
Well, like I said, yeah, and I think Chris had mentioned this to their member Lewis, member Diedrich did, but this isn't something, we kind of get from one topic to another, and certain things kind of take the place of another topic month to month and so on. But I think, you're not speaking to deaf ears. I mean, basically, I think everybody on this committee is supportive of that, and it's just kind of taken up the mantle to make that happen. And it just does take time. I mean, and I would also agree that, as Member Diedrich alluded to, I feel as if, a poor rollout really works against you. And if you do something haphazardly and just half baked or whatever kind of metaphor you want to use, then basically you run the risk of it turning people off and then it goes away, and then you're looking at several years down the road before anybody would even want to entertain it because it didn't appeal to the community at large too. So, what I'm saying is that, basically you've got everybody's ear on this, and I believe a certain amount of support there too. So it's not as if we want this to go away or be dismissed. I think this is something that we want to do that, but there's all these things that I think the other members, Member Kanatis and Member Diedrich have brought to light that reinforce that, yeah, we want this, but let's get some information and try to make this happen in the right time and place. So I think that's kind of what's being drove home here on that.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And you all really specified that perfectly.
All right. Anything else on the bike share program?
Actually,
This-
Chair Sarno, I'll just jump in.
Sure.
This actually may be an item that I may bring up as part of the new Downtown Development Authority, because obviously we have representatives from Swedish, Broadway, as well as City Center, business owners in the area. I can see this being part of the larger vision for the area.
Mayor.
Obviously, you kind of pointed out a lot of the issues that we have. I'm sorry? Could you, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if something jumped in, but
Yeah, go
anyway,
ahead.
no, I think I may bring this up as part of a discussion here in the near future. Obviously, the timeframe would be a little bit further out, but it's definitely worth discussing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Mayor Pro Tem. Yeah, and that's exactly my sentiments as well too, in terms of that larger goal in the development that's happening around the community, and particularly Civic Center and these areas as well too. So, Member Lewis, anything else on this?
No, nothing else, and I do appreciate the discussion. I just want to say that I enjoy more, I don't want to say off the cuff, but just banter back and forth about certain items rather than, yeah. So thank you.
All right. I think that was some good banter right there.
Yep.
All right. Appreciate it. All right, let's move on to our next item here. The alley maintenance program update. So this was brought to us courtesy of Director DeAndrea. And let me get to that. Just a general summary here, pretty much the alley maintenance efforts by the city. And I have to say, just immediately, Director DeAndrea, I appreciate you putting up what would be just how much the city is responsible for maintaining in that sense. But the 42.2 miles, that number really means something. So summarizing that, putting that in there is very beneficial for the community, I think, to understand how much of an undertaking that is. And then your details there of what the city's doing that as well too, I think was very helpful. But I'll let you speak to that if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, really, this was just an informational item. I know we had talked in relation to the garbage discussion, I believe, last month. So I just wanted to give you a little update on what we're trying to do. Just because of all the wet weather, we've also been receiving quite a number of phone calls. But it's the areas where we've completed this fine grading, which is on the attached map. We've really seen very few calls. So it feels like this is really working with the fine grading that we're doing and creating that V channel. So just wanted to give you an update that we are working with a good solution, I think, until we can get to the point where we can talk with City Council about a paving program of some sort. So just happy to answer any questions.
Well, I can immediately respond to this, Director DeAndrea, by saying that from my back alley, I've noticed a considerable amount of improvement. And I think it has to do with the V ditch, as well as the soil stabilization and dust suppressant that you alluded to here in your correspondence. So just the durability of it, I noticed has been just improved vastly, I think, with the material that you put down to help stabilize that and keep it that way for some time. So that's just immediately what I saw in terms of what is right behind my house here. So. Anybody else, the committee that has an alley and maybe has had their work or is waiting for this work to happen at their in their alleyway? Thanks for providing this images as well too there, Director DeAndrea. I think this really is nice to kind of identify trimming line and trimming limits, all this stuff. I think it's just good information when we look out in the back and can understand exactly what the city allows and so on, and through those corridors. So that was very helpful. Member Diedrich?
Yeah, thank you. I have a question for Maria. You mentioned that some citizens had requested their alleys be reviewed potentially out of cycle here, and I was just curious, what's the best way for them to request you guys take a look or do some work?
Yeah, they can just go on the city website, and under Public Works, there's a place where they can submit what we call a Q alert. And it's just basically a citizen request, and we call out alley grading specifically as an option. So they can just give us their address and we'll get it on the list.
Okay, and then when you do one of those sort of out of cycle, does that get reviewed then on the typical cycle again, or how do you guys handle that so you don't have this sort of patchwork all over?
Oh yeah, let me clarify. So what we can do is with our streets crews, we can go in and do those kind of temporary fixes, fill the low spots until the contractor can get to doing that fine grading. So we are contracting out that work. Chair Sarno, if you would scroll down just
Sure.
2 more pages to that map, you can see we've got kind of our plan of action here is we've completed the green, and there's some pink ones down in the kind of southwest corner of town. We're working on the orange north of Hampton right now. And as the memo says, we're set to award a contract on June 7th for this area south of Hampton and east of Broadway, those orange ones, for the summer of 2021. We were able to get some additional funding allocated from the city council. And so we're hoping that we can also undertake at least some of the brown ones, which is west of Broadway and then north of Oxford, even yet this year. But right now this map shows 2022. So that's our goal. So let's say you're up in the you're at Dartmouth and Clarkson, or excuse me, Chenango, in one of the brown alleys. You could still request that we come out and grade, so it would be street staff who would do that. And then, but we won't get to that street or that area until later this fall or next spring, likely, to do that fine grading, as was shown in that little cross section.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that there's a difference in those, and thank your staff for driving their grader out every once in a while when people ask for a little help out there. I have another question about this map too, and you actually mentioned one of the areas I was going to ask about was the area north of Hampton and east of Logan. Sort of that Hampton in the hospital area. There's an orange section there, and I know not too long ago, so there's a lot of new development in that area, and I know that some areas have required, paving in alleys or things like that. And I was a little surprised to see that area did not have paved alleys, given the large number of multifamily units that have gone into some of those areas and expanded commercial and parking garages too over there. And so, is there, I can't remember, I don't have a regulation, but I thought we had something about when you're putting more multifamily and you had to do some sort of paving, and, is there going to be a change in that area? Because I know some of those are kind of steep given the grades over there as well, which don't necessarily lend themselves to those gravel alleys.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So we implemented an updated version of our construction specifications and standards. So when a new development increases from, let's say, a single family to a triplex or greater, or you build an apartment building or whatever, basically, if you're increasing the volume of traffic in the alley, then we require you to pave that section of alley that's adjacent to your frontage, if you will, or backage, I guess, like whatever your lot width is. And so that makes for somewhat of a piecemeal system, because you might have a triplex go in and the single house is still there, and then the another triplex 2 or 3 doors down. But that was, I think our option was to maybe take that money in and try and put it in escrow, but then how do you prioritize who gets paid first? So it does feel a little bit piecemeal. We've gotten some negative feedback from developers about that. But it is starting to move us in the right direction of getting things paved. So, and I think the people who move into these new homes are appreciative that their segment is basically done now. So probably not the perfect solution, but that was our methodology or thought process.
In case you're wondering, once a month town meetings.
Okay, well, thanks for clarifying that. That sounds like an issue that could be very complicated based on the fragmented distribution of the new properties and a lot of things that go along with that. So I don't envy you guys trying to have to sort that whole thing out, but I really appreciate the intent of it and hope that we can, pay some dividends and maybe get some of these alleys paved, however it may work out here soon. Thanks, that's all.
Thanks for that, Member Diedrich. I have a quick question here for Director DeAndrea on this. So I think, and you did mention this, or this was in a previous meeting as well too, but the cycle, if you will, of the work in the alleys there, is it every then 2 years or 3 years that we would come back? So for example, if you're in zone 1 or whatever that is, and that gets done this year, would it be then, I guess, 23, 24 in terms of the city coming back to regrade and redo that? Is that how that works?
Our hope is that we only have to do the fine grading once, and then streets can keep up with it. That's our goal.
Interesting.
So,
okay, great.
And you'll see in a little bit when we go through the capital improvement program, exactly that, where we've still got a fair amount of money for, I believe, 2022 to finish that work. And then after that, you'll see those totals drop off significantly. So we still leave a little bit in case, like, we've got a few touch-ups here and there, but that really is the intent, is that we'd be done with that fine grading, and now it's just up to staff to maintain that.
I see. Very good.
But the pavement zones, which are the same zones, do work on a rotating 5-year cycle. So
Right.
we're in zone, we'll be in zone 3 this year, which is kind of the area where the brown highlights are. And then next year we go to zone 4. So it's a 5-year cycle for pavement.
Very good. Okay.
Oh,
Thank you for that. All right. All right. Any other comments on alley paving? Alley maintenance efforts? Okay, thank you for that, Director DeAndrea. Let's move on to our next item. Status of alternate member vacancy. So that was again brought to us, Director DeAndrea. You wanted to maybe, or perhaps it's Mayor Pro Tem, I'm not certain, but speak to that on us for what's happening with that.
Yeah, I thought somebody had asked the question at last meeting, so I had reached out to the clerk's office just to get exact dates. So they are, City Council will be doing interviews with applicants on May 24th. So let's see, that'd be a week from Monday. And then they would appoint those members on June 7th, and new terms would begin on July 1st. So we should have an alternate member by the July meeting.
Oh, great. All right. So good to hear that. And I'm, I'm glad that obviously it looks like there's been some candidates that have thrown their hat in the ring. So that's good to hear. Great.
Good luck. Just kidding.
We appreciate all of your well wishing there, Member Lewis. Thank you.
I'm just kidding.
No, it's fine. That's good. All right. So yeah, we're looking forward to that new member and their input. So thanks again for that. All right. Anything on that? Any other questions from the group? Don't see any at this time. We'll move on to new business. So the draft 2022 transportation related capital improvements project. So this is absolutely a very nice presentation you put together for us from the city. And I'm assuming that you can walk us through this there, Director DeAndrea, on that.
Yeah.
All right. Very good.
One time is 4 hours.
Good.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so just before I start, we are looking for action from the committee tonight. So that would be in the form of a motion. It might be something like after we go through this, it might be support the tier 1 projects as presented, or you might want to highlight some particular things that you'd like City Council to make sure that are in there. Whatever type of recommendation you want, that basically that motion would go back to the City Council as they consider that final list of projects to move forward for 2022. All right. So if you wouldn't mind, so we are focused tonight just on the transportation elements of the CIP, Capital Improvement Program. So there are a number of other projects that are part of the capital improvement program that you won't see here tonight. So things like building maintenance, parks priorities, that sort of thing. So the intent is just to focus on the transportation related projects. This slide just gives an overview of the budget process, which starts in January, if you can believe that. And you can see there we're up to the point where we're presenting to Transportation Advisory Committee. We've also presented this to the Planning and Zoning. The Library Board will weigh in, as well as the Parks and Rec Commission. So Parks and Rec Commission would weigh in on the parks and recreation related items. And then all of those elements will go back to both the Budget Advisory Committee and again to City Council for consideration. And ultimately leading to an October adoption for the 2022 budget. Okay, next slide.
Sure.
So this actually is in the code, that it's part of your committee's role is to make recommendations regarding the allocation of funds for capital expenditures related to roadway and transportation improvements. So I know it's been a little bit hit or miss on this in the past, but we do want to make sure that we're following the code and getting input and advice from as many of our boards and commissions as possible.
Okay.
Next slide. There we go. So we have broken out all of the projects to touch and kind of tie back into what our vision elements are. So as you can see there, there's 7 different vision pieces. So we want to focus on safety, infrastructure, neighborhoods, that sort of thing. And then if you go to the next slide, you can see how each of those of the projects relates to those different areas. So all projects across all funds is focused heavily on infrastructure. as has been our focus over the last several years as we try and rebuild our systems, maintain them. So there is a very high focus, and that's very appropriate for a capital improvement program, is that you're going to put a lot into your infrastructure. And those are the high dollar elements too. So roads, bridges, our storm sewer, of course, all of that is related to infrastructure, water and sanitary sewer systems, all of that. And you can see here, there also hits on safety. And then when we talk about tier 1 projects, so tier 1 is what staff has advised is what we feel is the most important. So what we'll get to in a minute is that we've got basically $18 million worth of just tier 1, not even tier 2 and tier 3 dollars, and we only have $5 million available to spend. So we're having to, that's was our first cut of trying to do a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 to say, okay, if we have to pick, we're going to look at the tier 1s. You will see tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, all of the projects. But we're saying that our feeling is that tier 1 is most important at this time. And even within that pool, there's $18 million worth of tier 1, and we only have $5 million available to spend. So this will involve some, basically that we can't do it all.
Mhm.
So next slide, please. So again, they've broken all of the projects out by the various funds. So we will focus tonight on the concrete utility fund for transportation, as that involves mostly sidewalks, curb and gutter, that sort of thing. And then the public improvement fund as well, where a lot of the larger transportation related projects are involved. Then there you can see the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 projects. Next slide. All right, so overall, so if you recall the concrete utility funds, so probably 96 to 97% of properties are opt into the concrete utilities. So they pay a certain amount on their utility bill, and then the city comes through, and if there are defective sidewalks, broken, significantly cracked or chipped, then, or if we have grade issues where it can be a tripping hazard, we'll go in and replace those and use the funds from the concrete utility fund to pay for that. So as you can see there, our balance at the beginning of the year was just under $1.5 million. And we estimate that we're going to spend about 1.1 million this year, leaving again, just a little bit of a lower balance there at the end of 2021. And then next year, our requests are just under $1 million for the sidewalk work that we intend to do. And curb and gutter. Next slide. So here you can see how that $925,000 for 2022 adds up. Again, both of these are listed as tier 1. We think they're important to keep up with infrastructure and reduce trip hazards, keep people safe. So it hits on a lot of those elements of the vision that we talked about. Then you can see over time, we are increasing that slightly to keep up with costs. But the intent would be is to work by area. Again, we work the same zone where we're doing the corrective maintenance work for the pavement. So it looks, well, it is, works together to do those repairs. So any questions on that? Okay. The city does also put in a portion of funds to for the concrete utilities. So if you're a corner lot, you only pay for your frontage. You don't pay for the side street. So the city picks those up, plus any ped ramps at the corner. So there is an amount, which you'll see in the next fund, where it's the city share, if you will, of sidewalk maintenance. Okay. So here's a little bit what we talked about is that we have just that last bullet there is that we have about $5 million available, and we have $18 million worth of just tier 1 requests. So some of the things that we're talking about is, would there be a property tax increase? Could we, how do we, if we wanted to do more than the 5 million, where would that funding come from? So the next slide, please.
Sure.
All right, so overall, what you see here is, again, we have a pretty healthy balance of 8.8 million. We're going to spend a fair amount this year in 2021, and then which would leave us roughly just under $1 million after the projects that we're anticipating to be completed. There's also some outstanding work that's being done for previously approved projects. So it leaves us just under $1 million for a fund balance. And then right now, again, we're anticipating about 16.4 requests for 2022. And we'll go through those in detail next. All right. So you can see here the tier 1, those are highlighted on the far left column. But then we've also listed the tier 2 and tier 3. So I'll just touch on these briefly. So our road and bridge is what we use for our internal materials for our street staff when they do asphalt patches. They often do utility cut patches. They also will do crack sealing in preparation before we come in and do a project with engineering of the slurry seal. So they will do as much of that work in-house as possible, and that $300,000 pays for those materials associated with that. So we think that's an important thing to do. It's part of the overall pavement maintenance efforts for the city. And I think we're doing that efficiently using our own staff. So we think that's why we think that's a tier 1 priority. Alley construction, which is tier 2 and not highlighted, we've made that a tier 2 because while it's important, at this point, we do not have a policy established with the city of how do we go about prioritizing alley construction. So probably the biggest question is who pays for that, of course. Is that a shared cost with the adjacent property owners? Is that a 100% on the city? Those are some of the things that we want to work through with city council and establish those policies before we actually get into full-blown alley construction. So if it was, let's just say that it was 100% paid for by the city, you can imagine everybody's going to raise their hand and say, I want to be first. So how do we prioritize people out of 342 alleys that aren't paved? If we were to go that route, how do we, establish some sort of criteria about which ones we do first? So that's what we want to work on in the remainder of 2021 to see if we can come up with something like that. And then that would move up to more of a tier 1, probably for 2023. There you can see the concrete utility city share. That's what I just mentioned. That's what the city basically pays in generally overall to pay for those side streets and some of the curb ramp work at the corners. And then walk and wheel implementation. So we talked about this a while ago. So these are the elements, the potential projects that were in the walk and wheel plan. Oxford bike lanes was in there. We've completed that. The Dartmouth bike lanes was in that walk and wheel plan. And we're basically trying to chip away at those recommendations and put money in each year to basically try and achieve one project that's in that $200,000 to $250,000 range. And again, we've made that a tier 1 to emphasize that that's important to keep up with that and keep adding those elements to promote alternative uses to vehicles. Signal equipment upgrade and replacement. This is what Chris Groff uses to buy new equipment or replacement equipment for the signals. So our detection cameras, our controller boxes for the signals, pretty much anything that goes with the signals, this is available for him to use to buy those materials. And then probably almost all of the time we're installing that with city staff. So it's really just truly for materials here that we use that $150,000. And again, we've made that a priority to keep up with our infrastructure, make sure it's working well. Pieces often break, just get too old to be useful. And so it's really a constant process to keep up with all of that. One project we're recommending to do this year in support of our asset management efforts is to do a complete traffic sign inventory. So these are things like stop signs, yield signs, street name signs, just to know how many we have and where they're located. So once we can identify that information, get locations, put that into our asset management system, it's just more efficient then to look at how do we go about replacing those on a regular basis, and again, create more of a proactive maintenance plan to maintain and upgrade those. Then we have included money for a traffic signal replacement. This could be completely removing the existing poles and putting up new ones, or it might be a major rebuild of a system, but you can see there the significant dollars that go with that. Right now we maintain 64 signals throughout the community. So even if we were to replace one a year, and that's what the 750,000 about would get us, is just one, that would still be a 64-year life cycle to get through all of them. So probably not as good as we'd like to have it, but you can see the significant dollar amount associated with that. And that's why we are considering, you know, things like roundabouts, because then we don't need all that equipment, and it's not an ongoing maintenance concern. It might not be right in all situations. Obviously, we're not going to get away from all signals, but there is a very significant cost to maintaining and upgrading those. And then finally, the West Dartmouth traffic calming, that 135,000 is our city match for that grant that we were able to receive for safer main streets. So this is the city portion. I believe it was 10% that we had to match to meet that grant requirement. And then finally, a little bit further out, we have building the Dartmouth Rail Trail Bridge at Dartmouth Avenue. And then these first and last mile connections is again kind of a catch-all program for building more sidewalks, maybe where there's not any existing right now, or just doing more kind of bike ped stuff. So for example, Littleton is pursuing on-street bike lanes on Windermere south of Bellevue. And then what we'd like to do is pursue the on-street from Bellevue north, which is still in Englewood, then to make it look like a seamless connection, because people don't obviously know whether they're in Littleton or Englewood, they just want to bike north. So we would take that up to Tufts where it kind of makes that turn. And so this would be that type of project that we'd fit in there. We do have money for that particular project in 2021. But as you can see here, this was one of the ones that didn't make the cut for future years. So any questions on that before we move to the next slide? There's actually 5 pages of these projects. So please let me know if I'm too much detail or not enough. So, okay, we'll move to the next slide.
Yep.
Okay. So the big one here at the top is the Broadway and 285 interchange. So this is a little bit deceiving here. So it's 8.4 million. And why we put that in there, so that's the grant amount that we're going to get. So it's not money that the city has to come up with, but the way that the grant works is that we upfront the money and then we get reimbursed through CDOT over time once it's expended. So we do have to have that money in the books or in the bank, if you will, in order to move forward with that project. So this doesn't count towards that $5 million limit, but we did want to show it there as from a cash standpoint and a funding standpoint, we have to have that money available and not just have like a zero balance and say, well, we're good for it. You know, we actually have to have that cash. So that's why that's in there. Concrete program, accessible ramps. This is trying to do more than just through the concrete utility program, but trying to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of upgrading some of our ADA ramps at the corners. So we've done a really good job. I think last year we did almost 68 of them. And our goal was 45. So we're hitting about 1.5 times of what we'd like. But this gives us that funding to do just a little bit more throughout the city. And we are working with the Parks and Rec Department to do some parking lot maintenance. Sorry. And we actually do that on our behalf.
It's dinner time.
So we will include this in one of our contracts and then actually perform the work, and then Parks and Rec well, we use this fund, I guess. So we just do that on their behalf since we're already issuing a contract, and we usually get a better price because we have a larger quantity of asphalt that we're doing. You can see some projects here further out for the Southwest Greenbelt Trail. Alley maintenance, so this is what I talked about. You can see here, so next year we still have that larger dollar amount and then it tails off. So again, hopefully the intent would be is that street staff could take care of this and that we just need a minimal amount, if any, in case we have some blow ups or some areas that we need to come back in and touch up in future years. And then we do have alley paving in here again. Our citywide transportation plan, I had wanted to do that. We've never done that. It's create an actually citywide transportation plan. It is part of the comprehensive plan. There is a chapter on transportation, but we don't have something separate. But you can see there that's fallen to tier 2 again. We do want to do, in anticipation of future grant funding, is to look at Broadway in terms of what kind of cross section we want to, for the next round of federal funding. We want to look at potentially reconstructing Broadway. If you drive north on Broadway, north of Yale, you know that Denver rebuilt all of their segments and changed the cross section and where they allow parking and kind of did nodes and park out bump outs here and there. So we might continue that type of cross section, but we want to get something at least schematically planned so that we can apply for those future grants, which would come through in either late 2023 or 2024. Okay. And then finally, yeah, the pavement maintenance by area. So this is, again, our pavement management program that's in the 5 zones. The 3 million is a increase from where we were last year. We were at about 1.8 million. And we've increased that significantly to try and keep up with the needs of the entire community. I don't know with the $5 million limit that we're going to be at that level to take 3 million of the 5 million to put towards this, but that was our ask.
So
any questions, or we'll move to the next slide?
I have just a real quick question, Director DeAndrea, on the Broadway reconstruction evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
So where would the limits of that be then? I'm imagining on the north end from Yale, from where the city begins to, and how far south?
All the way. So to our we probably wouldn't do one project, but this evaluation would look at the segment basically from Yale to 285 as having kind of one cross section, and then that from 285 to our southern border as a separate or a different section. But we'd look at both of those together with that money. So
not just that was my question, just not within the, I guess, the just downtown area of Broadway, but also extending to the south.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right. So you can see all the projects on here are either further out. There you can see the 3rd and 4th line is where we have scheduled potentially Broadway. So Hampton to Bellevue is the southern section, and then the northern section would be Yale to Hampton. So again, we'd be looking at the entire corridor of Broadway with that evaluation in 2023, and then starting design in 2024 and 2025 respectively, with construction occurring the following year. And our goal, where you see that 16 million and 13 million, would be is that we could potentially get some significant grant funds to supplement or basically erase some of those high costs. We did want to, we had put in for Floyd to mill and overlay that entire street, Inca to Broadway. We are planning to do the on-street bike lanes there. And so it would have been nice. We can't pay for mill and overlay with the grant. It really is just for the striping and the signage, but we thought it'd be nice to, because it needs it to mill and overlay that entire street before we put down the bike lanes. But again, unfortunately, we're at tier 2 there. We've also put in some some amounts for neighborhood street lighting, just where there's either missing lights or where we need some enhancements. And then we are looking at, through the area by Swedish and Craig, which is Old Hampton, that's kind of that main street that runs in front of both hospitals, is doing what we call a complete streets analysis. So, and ultimately construction. So what we would do is widen the sidewalks, eliminate the on-street parking, and put in pedestrian lighting, pedestrian amenities, and really make it more bike friendly, more probably on-street bike lanes as well, and make it less about the cars. And again, just having them access more the parking garages that have been constructed as opposed to using on-street parking, and really slowing the traffic down. So a lot of people are walking from the south side of the street to get to either the hospitals. And so they're having to cross Old Hampton, and we want them to do that safely. And then there's another mid-block crossing at the Gothic, which is a ways out. And then our Clarkson Bike Boulevard, we did call out that specifically because, again, we are applying for a grant potentially to get some of those funds to look at that and implement that Clarkson Bike Boulevard. So we wanted to at least have a placeholder there in case we do get that grant funding. And then the final project is the Hampton Rail Trail. So this would build a pedestrian bridge over Hampton, basically from the south side, which is where that storage facility is, across Hampton to where the Chuck E. Cheese is. So just put that, and that would be part of the rail trail network that we're trying to ultimately create. All right, and then the sidewalk gap construction. So we talked a little bit earlier about missing sidewalks and areas where the sidewalks are too narrow. And so this 250,000, and then you can see over the next couple of years, we have money identified to try and build some of those gaps and or widen sidewalks to make them ADA compliant. And we are in that process of, we've completed that analysis of looking at where do we have those gaps, where the sidewalks too narrow. So we're right now prioritizing, trying to create some prioritization and criteria by which we prioritize where we should start first. And probably we're bringing that back to City Council in June or July of this year to talk about that. Streetlights and furniture repair and replacement. So we do maintain, there's quite a bit of street furniture in the downtown area, as well as those decorative streetlights. So the city is responsible for maintaining the pedestrian lights, not Excel Energy. They just do the high overhead Cobra ones. So that's why we put some money in here to keep up with that. You can see their reconstruction of East Paseo, which is that existing mid-block crossing in the downtown area, is a couple of years out. And then building a shelter over the Englewood station up on the platform by RTD. It's just to do something to keep people kind of out of the elements and provide somewhat of a shelter up there. RTD has not been really forthcoming in terms of working with us on providing that. So they feel that what's out there is adequate. And this is a project that our community development department has really wanted to push forward, is that they just feel that it's a little bit too exposed for people. And then implementation of neighborhood traffic calming. So we had talked things like, just like we were talking about Floyd Place and Floyd Avenue, things, bump outs, any kind of engineering types of improvements would fall under kind of this general category. So as projects came up or were identified by residents throughout the year, we could touch on this and use these funds to do those types of projects. And then again, finally at the Floyd and Elati, this was another grant, successful grant that we received. And so the 350,000 is the city match to that grant. So we are going to rebuild Floyd and Elati. So to just make it a little bit safer, channelize some of the movements, and make sure that people can travel through there safely. Okay, last slide. Broadway safety improvements. These are for things like, remember we did the improvements at Floyd where we now are allowed to do, it was really Chris's group that did a lot of this, where we now can make a left turn from westbound Floyd onto southbound Broadway, right by the post office right there. Before you couldn't make that move. And so as we channelized that northbound right turn from the westbound direction and did a lot of signal modifications to make that work. So those are the types of projects we would do with that money. See, we have some bridge maintenance further out. We also want to consider Union Avenue repaving. So this is in the, if you know where the 7-Eleven is on the west side of Santa Fe, kind of down as you approach, start to get towards Littleton. This is a very heavily used road for waste management and a lot of other truck traffic. So it really does get a beating. And it needs not only a mill and overlay, but a total reconstruction. So repaving. And you can see the dollar amount that goes with that. Sorry about that. I'll finish up here. So similarly, Dartmouth Avenue reconstruction. We've got a small chunk there that we need to rebuild. Street reconstruction. So this is actually beyond the pavement management program. It'd be putting $500,000 toward actual street reconstruction. Areas that just have completely failed and need more than just a mill and overlay or a slurry seal to rebuild them. Widening sidewalks and arterial and collector streets to 6 feet. Again, speaking to what we talked about in the public comment section, is what feels comfortable. So there's a minimum for ADA, but what really feels comfortable, and especially in our kind of major streets where it's higher volume and higher speeds of traffic, we'd like to widen those out to 6 feet if we could, and where it's possible to do that. Rail trail construction, this would be not just the bridges that were highlighted in separate line items earlier, but these are the actual trail that would connect those bridges and starting to build out some of that network. And then finally, the Broadway and 285 bridge enhancement. So again, it's rebuilding that. We have the money assigned already to rebuild the interchange, but we want to do some aesthetic elements, maybe add some decorative lighting, perhaps do some sort of public art underneath as you travel under Broadway on those retaining walls on either side, and do something just to enhance that area and make it look nicer. Again, those types of elements are not eligible for grant funds. That's really for the brick and mortar, if you will. And so this would come from city funds to do those types of enhancements. So I know that was a lot. And you can see there on the far right, that's totals. Oh, that's for the total. But we are just under, I believe was 16 million for all of those projects just in 2022. So I'll open that up, and if you want to talk about, you know, things that really caught your eye there, things that are important to you as a committee, be happy to answer any questions.
So the tier 1 projects there, Director DeAndrea, that you've highlighted here, this is what the city, and I imagine staff has determined to be the priorities, if you will, projects. And in partnership with, of course, you've already submitted for grants on some of these and so on. So they're the ones that are in the hopper, ready to go and feel that are a priority for the city. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. At this time, are you requesting that the committee, pretty much from the information that's distributed here, make a recommendation as to all of these projects, or in general, or is that essentially what you're seeking here?
Yeah, and it may be, you know, like if you see a tier 3 project that you'd like to elevate to tier 1, things like that, we'd certainly take that into consideration. Or it's, yeah, if you're comfortable with advancing the tier 1, are there any priorities within tier 1 that are, you know, would be of higher interest? Because again, even from the tier 1, we're going to have to cull those back to $5 million. So it's really, what are your priorities, and what do you want to inform the city council about from a ETAC perspective.
And as you mentioned, you're looking for a recommendation this evening, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, yeah. Well, I feel a little remiss not having Member O'Connell here for her input as well too. So, but I think a lot of this has already come on across our radar throughout our meetings as well. So it's not, there's too many surprises here that I saw by scrolling through these projects here. Is the city, oh, we've got Member Diedrich first. He chimed in first. There you go. Member
Thank
Diedrich,
you.
go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious. I'm looking through this. I will probably have a couple questions, but just a quick one for Maria. The stoplights traffic signal replacement is a very expensive line item on here, and I know there are several that have been waiting quite a while to be replaced. You know, I remember years ago on the committee, I have a couple of blind neighbors, and they were talking about a signal replacement in a certain part of town, and they said, "Oh, it's going to happen in the next year." And, you know, that was 4 or 5 years ago, and it still hasn't been replaced. And not a big deal, but you know, it was you know, proposed as a solution to a problem, and has been a while. And I'm sure that's probably the case in a few parts of town. And you know, it's not that they're malfunctioning in all cases or anything, but, you know, they could benefit the situation at the intersections by having new ones that have more capabilities and a longer life cycle, right? I'm just kind of curious on, so this is just specific to that line item. You know, if you do several in 1 year, can you get some bulk discounts on them? Maybe you have, you know, 5 or 7 or 10, or I don't know what sort of numbers look like on those. But, you know, if you had similar ones in different parts of the cities, you know, different roadways and types of intersections use similar types of signals, would it make more sense to try and get a better deal on more of those at one time and do them in more of a bulk buy? I'm just kind of curious on that.
Sure. Yeah. I think from a design perspective, you would, like, let's say we put out, because you would have to design them and have an engineer prepare plans and specifications. So I think from you know, doing 3 at once versus 2 or even 1 would probably save some money there. But so much of that amount is the components. So it's the mast arms themselves, the controller boxes, all of the electronics that go into it. There might be a little bit as cost savings, but probably not a whole lot in doing it in bulk or multiples.
Okay. Yeah, you know, we'd had a nice trip down and saw what Chris Groth has going on with the traffic signals down there. Had a great tour down there, and appreciate the complexity of what goes into some of those, especially the more modern ones that give us the functions that people are coming to expect. And so, thanks.
All right, Member Knattison.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting to think about some of the trade-offs here. Like you were mentioning how the signal replacements are, you know, I think $750,000 a year, and then, but if we were to switch to roundabouts, then that can eliminate the need for that maintenance, which seems like a really interesting trade-off. Another topic that's on my mind is the potential switch to a single trash provider or single waste provider in the city. And I was wondering if you had any sort of an estimate about the impact of that change. I know that one of the big elements there is that we would go from the equivalent of 40,000 cars worth of impact on the streets to more like 5,000 or 7,000 every Wednesday. And just curious if you had any sense of what the impact would be to the city's expenses related to street maintenance would be if we could switch to a single hauler.
That's a good question. I have not quantified that. I think it might be difficult to do, but I think we could qualitatively say that yes, you know, it's gonna, if not, you know, truly improve the situation. It's at least not going to make it worse. And so maybe then we can catch up more with our pavement management as is, you know, with the 1.8. So yeah, it's certainly not going to hurt.
Thank you.
Thanks, Member Knudsen. Yeah, I think that's actually very timely as well too, as we're ramping up to have the city, you know, fully engage with this change, and to have that information at least somewhere there to say, yes, this is an improvement. I mean, this is one aspect that as a committee we took on because of the fact of understanding how much damage all of these garbage trucks do to the pavement section. And as difficult as that could be to quantify that, we understand that that is the case, but putting some sort of a number or range might be helpful for the community, for them to understand, you know, that this is how much we're saving because, you know, you're taking away then the immediate need for the maintenance or that cycle being much tighter due to the, you know, defects in the pavement or damage to the pavement because of these trash trucks just rolling through our neighborhood. So yeah, very good comment there, Greg. Thanks. Okay, we got Member Diedrich. Go ahead.
Thanks. I'm curious, Maria, you have a tier 1 item for Dartmouth Avenue reconstruction west of Santa Fe Drive. I'm aware there are some ongoing efforts. There's that bridge. There's the development at the top of the hill. We've had quite a bit of discussion about what's going on with Dartmouth and sort of what the future state of that is going to be. And I know there have been some developments recently with approvals for what will be going into certain parts of that development at the top of the hill there, west on Dartmouth. My question is, you have this as tier 1 and $500,000 on here. I'm curious, is this like very critical, immediate maintenance type of things? And I know you said it was a little more complicated than just putting a, you know, extra layer of something on top, but knowing that there is going to be this large redevelopment and further construction on that road, just curious how that fits in.
Sure, yeah. So the bridge project, which will be bid out this fall and be constructed probably most of next year, reconstructs the bridge in about to, I forget what that north-south street is. I want to say it might be Layton. So which is about midway between Santa Fe and where the South Platte Drive is, if you can picture that in your mind. So basically between the east edge of the bridge and Santa Fe, we're going to reconstruct about midway. So that leaves a gap between Santa Fe and midway of that section. And if you travel eastbound on there, you can see a lot of shoving and rutting of the asphalt as you approach the intersection with Santa Fe. And that's, again, a lot of heavy traffic slowing down to stop at that intersection because mostly they get stopped because obviously there's not as much green time given to the side streets as there is to Santa Fe. And so there's just kind of a need there to reconstruct that, probably in concrete as opposed to asphalt. And so we would basically rebuild that 1.5 or 2 blocks there with that $500,000. Does that make sense? I should have had a picture of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've driven on that road, and I think others who have or can have an opportunity to go over there. There's some rough crossings on some of the, you know, railroads that have been worked on, and the rutting. Totally understood. I have another question for you. So you had a slide in here that talked about the capital funds project and the mill levy, and it mentions that it hadn't been increased since the 80s. You know, the city has gone through many changes since then, and I don't want this to become a discussion about should we raise taxes or anything like that. But, you know, you have a pretty big disparity between, you know, what's recommended in the different tiers of projects. And I'm just kind of curious, you know, we're working on these grant projects and stuff. Is there an anticipation that maybe some of these things that are tier 2 or tier 3 might be able to be addressed with, you know, grants or other sources of funding besides this public improvement fund over the next few years? Or, you know, I'm just kind of curious on that.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't think the intent of staff is to recommend a property tax increase this year, but I think it does have to be part of a larger discussion because, as you said, or even that first bullet point there shows is that our needs continue to outpace the available revenue. So we're being as aggressive as we can, and I know other departments are as well in terms of grant funding, but that only kind of gets us so far. And so it's, you know, whether it's property taxes or sales tax or some other form of revenue, I think that has to be part of the larger discussion with the community and with city council about, you know, do we just stay at that 5 million over time? Or is there a way to get an influx of cash to help maybe be a little bit more proactive with some of the capital projects that have been identified? Not just in 2022, but as you can see, the next 5 years out as well.
Well, I also recall, and I just want to jump in here real quick, Member Diedrich, but we did have as a committee, I think, and this would have to be obviously, I think, probably at least a year or so ago, a presentation, I believe, for some sort of funding. And if it was raising the gasoline tax, I believe that might have been it. But there was, do you remember that, Greg? You kind of recall that we had somebody, and I can't remember that. It had to be over a year ago. But so if it's not just the property taxes, maybe some other tools in the toolbox, if you will, to help address this deficiency that we're trying to meet here. And you know, speaking of this tax is not being raised since the 80s, I think, in terms of that gasoline tax as well, too. That's something else that hasn't bumped up since, I think, the 90s, if I recall. So, you know, it feels like it's just been atrophied, and we're really trying to do a lot with the same money that's been revenue that we've had for decades, which it's hard for me to think about, you know, me spending what I do now in terms of what I was making when in the 90s or something like that. So it is consequential to being able to achieve what you want as a city. But that's not here. I guess this is just for information in terms of what the funding sources are and where it's at right now. So, but yeah, I don't know if there's anything in the future there that, again, if there's presentations and so forth that can be brought to the group, and probably now's not the time, but as it gets closer to election time and ballot initiatives and so on, something of that nature too. So if there's anything out there, let's entertain it. Sorry, but back to you there, Member Diedrich. This is your item. If you have anything else.
No, that's it on this item. I'm still going up and down, scrolling through this list, trying to decide what, you know, I think should be moved around. And it's hard because there's a lot of different things on here, and they're all important for various reasons.
Yeah.
And, you know, some of them are very critical safety type projects, and some of them are not quite as critical, but, you know, the staff, I think, did a good job kind of identifying and what's tier 1, 2, and 3. And, you know, there's probably some sub tiers in between, but, you know, you have to divide and draw the line somewhere just to separate them out. So I'm struggling with what to recommend or not recommend. And maybe, I guess that's a question for Maria, or maybe Mayor Pro Tem Sierra, is, you know, what sort of recommendation would be appropriate out of here? Because I mean, I would love to say let's fund them all, but I know we have limited dollars, and so I want to be the most helpful that I can in the recommendation that we provide here.
Yeah.
So I guess either, you know, Maria or Mayor Pro Tem Sierra, either one of you, you know, I want to be helpful. So what, you know, what can we do to make our recommendation out of this committee tonight helpful?
Yeah, I think even identifying, you know, maybe your top 4 or 5 that you really want to make sure council considers. Maybe that's a way to at least try and help narrow it down. Or groups of projects, perhaps. Like infrastructure, like maybe, you know, grant matches, maybe that's a natural recommendation because otherwise we'd lose the grant money. So that might be a priority, as well as some of our kind of ongoing stuff in terms of keeping up with infrastructure, like the traffic signal replacement and the signal equipment kind of priorities, as well as some of the maybe neighborhood traffic calming or walk and wheel to get towards that, you know, alternative transportation modes. Just a thought.
I just have a sense that Mr. Chris Groth probably is very much in the tier 1 category for his traffic signal stuff. That's my guess right now, but.
Yeah, you're correct.
Thank you. I just needed that backup there, Chris. Thanks for that. So, Member Canadison, oh, go ahead, Member Diedrich. If you're waiting for, and I don't know if Mayor Pro Tem, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I'm
Chris's
here.
comment.
Sorry, I'm over here. Yeah, I'm over here arguing with my son, trying to get him to take a shower. So,
That's-
but in
That's
terms,
tier 1.
it's that struggle. It's a nightly struggle.
Yeah.
But I guess any type of recommendation that comes from any board or commission, since you guys are looking at issues over the course of a year that, you know, city council really only gets conversation on it a few times a year. So if you have any type of perspective on what needs to come up and come down, and obviously like each individual council member has their own priorities. Like I look at this and I'm starting to notice that the rail trail has to happen because we're starting to make this as, you know, we've already decided that it's, you know, that the north of Dartmouth is going to happen as part of the Winslow Crane development, right? But you know, we still have, I think it's a tier 3 and like 4 years down the road on this list, which is fine. But I'm just like, I start noticing these things and I'm like, well, I want to make sure that this happens at some point. So I'm going to, you know, talk to that point over the course of the next 2 years. But I guess from your perspective, if there is something that this committee has talked about over the past year that they see as a priority, definitely bring it up and we're going to take it into consideration because we may not have had discussions about that point over the course of the year. And, you know, it's your eyes have been on it. So yeah, we definitely would take it into consideration.
Okay. Well, I guess we can continue to scroll and Member Canadison, you've been patient here, so let's get to your question.
Sorry, I asked my question and forgot to lower my hand. I guess that, you know, as my like thoughts in summary are that definitely I agree with the idea of going for the grant matching money. That makes sense to me, you know, both like as a personal budget strategy and as a city budget strategy. If we have essentially free money from somewhere, then definitely we should be prioritizing those items. You know, beyond that, I like we could try to cut out a handful of smaller things, but they just seem like they won't have much impact. And it seems to me that we should try to look for strategic places where a project today can have an impact on the maintenance costs in the long run. So I'm thinking about things like the bike boulevard. I know that that's not necessarily a tier 1 item, but my sense is that switching a street to a bike boulevard would reduce the long-term maintenance costs for that street. And so that feels like an appealing strategy to me because it feels like a win-win, that we are improving our bike network, helping to keep Englewood active, you know, which is one of the top priorities in our strategic plan, and then reducing our long-term maintenance costs. So those are the things on my mind.
Member Lewis, do you have any input on this? What would you like to see? What would be your some of your dream projects, if you will. You're on mute there, Patrick. All right, we'll get back to you as soon as you're online there, Patrick. So agreeing to that. So yeah, I really curious, the old Hampton complete streets, Clarkson to US 80 or to 285. That's one of interest to me there too, because that corridor there in front of Swedish and Craig feels like quite an anchor in the community, if you will. And I think that what you'd suggested there, Director DeAndrea, about some of those improvements and making that just more readily accessible for pedestrians, cyclists, and just calming that street in a way. And I've seen quite a bit of building that's going on around there too, and that's turning into kind of its own corridor of you will, of businesses, residential, and everything else. It's really picked up and taken off here within the last couple of years, I want to say. So that one right there is one that I look to as pretty close to a tier 1 to me, as I would say. But again, that's something that if it can't happen now, it'll happen soon. So. And understood that one right there is 1.2 million. So that's quite a bit of money for that one as well too. Funding required for that, sure. And I would absolutely agree that everything listed here from tier 1 through tier 3, they all have merit. And so it is very difficult, as I think Member Diedrich pointed out, that to scroll through this and kind of start prioritizing that. So yeah.
I have a question for Maria about the Broadway and 285 bridge enhancement. I'm just sort of curious what that entails. I am personally in favor of having something architecturally interesting. This is going to be a main intersection in our community, probably for the next 60 years, maybe. I mean, this old bridge has been there for a long time, and this one will be too. So I want to make sure we do a good job on it. But I'm curious what exactly that entails, if it adds more amenities or features, or is it more architectural? Do we know what that looks like?
Yeah, we're still in the process of developing some options. So we're probably going to show those at the next public meeting, which I believe is in July. And then also, and let the community weigh in and also bring those to city council. We'll probably bring them back to ETAC as well. So this might be things though, like the bridge railing up on Broadway, again, pedestrian lighting. So there might be different options of how to do that. And then public art, probably on those walls underneath, and potentially up on the bridge itself or at the abutments at either end of the bridge. Again, just to bring some life and color and energy to the project, the base project, if you will.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's something that, in my opinion, people could dismiss adding any ornamentation to something utilitarian like a bridge, but because of where it is and the way that it can have an opportunity to connect different parts of the community that are divided by that roadway. I think that it would be very good for us to keep that on there. Just procedurally question, you know, I've been taking notes about what people have sort of been in favor of or some things to drop down. Are we expecting to have a motion by the committee on something, or is this more of a verbal feedback for direction?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I think the finance department is looking for more of a formal motion, even if that's a list of projects or priorities, and say, yeah, this is what we like.
Okay, and that can include voting some things up and voting some things down as well, I think. Okay. Anybody else who has a question, feel free to go ahead. I'm gonna keep looking here.
Can you give a little bit more background to the Union Avenue repaving there on that, the extent of that there?
Yeah, so basically we've rebuilt just west of the intersection of Santa Fe, about maybe 100 or so feet. It's right on the north side of the 7-Eleven, because there was a lot of turning movements as you're going southbound on 85 to turn to go westbound on Union. And so we rebuilt a couple 100 feet of that, and then just, it's like, where do you start and stop? So the rest of the road really does need some significant work as well. Again, that was more of a safety issue because you had the turning vehicles, and so they're pushing that asphalt up. We did do that in concrete, that 100 or so feet. And so we wouldn't do this in concrete, that would be even more expensive. But the idea is now that you're on the straightaway, so you're not turning, but still it's that significant amounts of heavy traffic that's contributing to that poor condition. And then it goes, I'm not sure what the road is, but basically to our boundary with Sheridan or Littleton, who's ever on the west end of Union out there. But this would run in front of, yeah, waste management.
Right.
All of that down there, that industrial area.
So in essence, a full reconstruction. Yeah. No
Yes.
mill and fill on that one. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I just, and I do have, you know, just the Google Earth up right now. So if anybody wants to pivot from the presentation to a location or what, for whatever reason, just let me know.
Maria, can you remind me what's in the walking wheel implementation line items?
I'm sorry, I missed that. What's in the walking wheel?
Yeah, walking wheel. You have it as tier 1, you know, varies between 2 and 250,000 a year. You know, we spent a lot of money on this plan, and I think it's good that we're implementing it, but I was just kind of curious what that was going to in the next couple of years.
Yeah, I believe some of the priorities, there's a Clarkson Bike Boulevard. So that's a north-south one. So we've now done Oxford east-west, we've done Dartmouth east-west, and now we would be looking at Clarkson, and then I believe Sherman is also a north-south route. So over on the east side of town. So I think we want to, in the next couple of years, really focus on, again, doing something more like that. Denver is also starting to develop some plans for Franklin Avenue, which is a border street that we share with them. So again, a north-south piece, north of Hampton or 285, that would again provide a north-south connection with on-street bike lanes, and we'd be expected to contribute to that project. So that's kind of that funding source for those types of projects.
And so for the sake of argument, Director DeAndreas, let's just say that as a committee, we decide to bump up a tier 2 to a tier 1. What happens from there?
Then I think those recommendations go back to City Council.
Mhm.
And they get the fun job of taking everybody's recommendations into account. So Parks and Rec, library, everybody else, and then saying, how do we, so not just the transportation pieces, but all of this, how do we start to, you know, basically rack them and stack them to what are the overall priorities for the city. So they get the really tough job. So really it is just a recommendation from ETAC. So yeah, whether it's a tier 2 or whatever, then they get to take that into consideration.
Well, members, is there anything that really speaks to us that we think we should, as a group, address or prioritize? That's a change from what's already been prioritized here on this presentation.
I'm happy to summarize a few themes I heard here, just to kind of recap a little bit, and maybe we can add or remove a few things from that. You know, things that I heard people were in favor of included the grant matching opportunities, the bridge enhancement, the concrete utility share city portion. Of course, I think we should support that. And the old Hampton corridor and the rail trail. Another thing I was interested in was the concrete program accessible ramps. I think that's something that can serve very long term with an investment now that can make a difference, to some comments that Member Knudsen made earlier. But also that could be something that could wait another year or two to implement if we needed to. Some things I think I heard some comments on that maybe we didn't need to prioritize included some traffic signal replacement, especially pending some traffic circle or intersection things coming in. Also Union Avenue repaving. And then I had a couple of personal things that I thought maybe could be delayed, like the sign inventory and the Parks and Rec lot maintenance. That could most likely wait for another year, maybe with a patch or two if they needed them, rather than some repaving. And I'd love to hear people's thoughts and comments on that. And some of those are my opinions, so feel free to bring your own opinions as well.
Yeah, I think the one for me that I'm just curious about in terms of swapping out, if you will, would be the Union Avenue paving. Where was that? What was here? Union Avenue repaving. And without knowing how much of a dilapidated state that is right now, but I'm curious of that. And one of the reasons why is that if I guess it right now, waste management is there, as Maria, you pointed out. Is that going to continue? Then we do that, and then you know, is that something that the damage is going to continue because of the number of trucks still going there, especially with the trash hauler initiative kind of up in the air and in flux on that, and swapping that out with, I think, the old Hampton complete streets, Clarkson to US 285. And that's again just based off of, I've seen just an incredible amount of building going on there, plus the hospitals there. It's I think the largest employer in the city, I believe, is both, you know, Swedish and Craig there. So it's an incredibly important corridor there in that sense. So that's one that just is kind of glaring to me in terms of prioritizing the one over the other. And that repaving can be bumped down to tier 2 on Union.
Chief Sarno, do you
Is it-
mind if I just jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
And I think this is, I guess this is a question for Director DeAndre, because I believe the whole Union road reconstruction, I think we had to kind of do an wasn't an emergency, but I think there was a detour there for part of the winter. Director DeAndre, am I correct? Because I kind of remember this coming in front of council sometime over the past few months, and I'm guessing that's the reason why it's Tier 1.
Yeah, that was that, we rebuilt that first 100 or so feet right just west of Santa Fe. So we had to do a detour because it wasn't wide enough and we were doing it in concrete. So we had to basically build half and half of the road. So I think we built the north half first and we detoured people up that frontage road and then split traffic and then had to continue to detour them right while we built the other half. But it was only again that for that first 100 or so feet just west of, basically beyond 7-Eleven's access off of Union.
I can really quickly just go there. Yeah, this is where that 7-Eleven is right there, correct, Director DeAndrea, right? And
Yeah, so I think we took it maybe to that back access point there, or further west access point.
oh, this frontage road right here. Or I'm sorry, this
Yeah.
you're saying right here, this access.
I don't even think we went all the way to the frontage road.
Okay, so it's somewhere about there, maybe, yeah. All right. And so doing a full reconstruction all the way to Sheridan here. Yeah. Is that it? Is that it, Mayor Pro Tem? Is there anything else you wanted to add to that in terms of regarding?
No,
the
that was it.
union?
Just yeah, it was just more from my recollection, just from previous budgets.
Okay. I can go back to our agenda here. Presentation. Trying to see. Just want to ask Member Lewis if you're still on the line. Curious, I don't see him up there, but there's a phone number here and I'm not sure who that is, but if that's him or not. I don't hear anything at this time. So that is the one that I'm just going to throw in my hat in the ring on that. In regard to swapping out Tier 1 to Tier 2 for Old Hampton complete streets, to swapping that to Tier 1 and putting the Union paving as Tier 2. Can you, Director DeAndrea, can you give us a little bit more, and you did, I'm sure, go through this, but revisit this Floyd Inca to Broadway again? Just speak to that one.
Yeah, so one of our on-street biking, on-street bike lane projects was to install on Floyd from Inca to Broadway. And I believe that's in the walk, I'm sure it's in the walk and wheel as well. And so then we're rebuilding that intersection of Floyd and Lottie, which is in that stretch too. And so the idea with this amount was to repave, mill and overlay Floyd for that stretch so that we could, when we put the bike lanes down, that it's on a new surface, basically.
Hmm. And in terms of the, I guess, structural number, or pretty much just to say the shape of Floyd as opposed to Union is much more deteriorated, I guess, than Floyd is at this point too. Is that
Yeah, the
accurate?
dollar amounts don't seem right there. That's a pretty long stretch of Oxford, or excuse me, Union for 1.2 million. So I think we need to revisit that.
Mhm.
And this may be a little high, but the idea is that Floyd just, yeah, it doesn't get as much traffic as like Union. And this would just go for a mill and overlay, and that it's in still a good enough condition that it doesn't need full reconstruction.
That's it, yeah.
What do you guys on the committee think about that intersection? It's a tier 1 project for this year proposed.
Which one is that, Member Diedrich?
Floyd and Lottie intersection.
Oh, okay, Floyd and Lottie. Yeah, let me get to that.
Isn't that the intersection we were just talking about
No, that's actually a different one.
for the bike
So-
lane?
Well, let me get to that. I thought that was a separate one.
Yeah, the $350,000, I believe it's at the bottom of one of the slides, is for the grant match to rebuild that intersection. There it is.
Yeah, this one, Chris.
Oh.
Yeah, so
That's a
yeah.
grant match one. Mhm.
Okay, sorry. I
We
guess
could-
just to clarify then, the mill and overlay for the bike path was on what street?
It's also in Floyd all the way from Inca in the west, which is basically the RTD parking lot, all the way to Broadway. So it is a fairly long stretch of road.
Okay, and I guess I was just confused. I thought those were part of the same line item. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. Boy, is this a little bit too overwhelming when we have our wish list in front of us there, members? It's everything we've dreamed about and yeah.
Well, let's put together a list here. I think, we could probably look at this and ask questions all night, but, the city
Yeah.
needs some direction from us on this one here. So I think we should at least identify a few things that we, think are high priority and a few things that, maybe could be moved down a little bit. So, whatever you think would be the best way to do that, Neil.
Well, Member Diedrich, I would think that the first thing that we can maybe agree to as a committee is obviously projects that have, grants attached to them or funding, that sort of capacity would be beneficial, I think, for us, because that's money that we're getting from outside sources and it's tied to that. And I think if we agree that those are projects that are obviously a priority and connected to the funding that we're getting from outside agencies or grants, and that would be the first thing I would say, without question, we approve those and move forward with those. And then from there, it's, I don't really see anything from tier 3 that should jump to tier 1.
I have a
Although
quick
that-
question.
Go ahead.
Neil, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
I'm looking at our participants, and it looks like you and I are the only 2 members left on here. I only see 6, like maybe member Knudsen dropped off or member Lewis dropped off.
Yeah, and
So procedurally, I don't know if we can make a recommendation right now.
that's true. Although I'm not certain. I know, Patrick was in New York, so I don't know what difficulty he's having there, but that's kind of odd for member Knudsen to just drop off. Maybe he's trying to get back online. I don't know if I want to try to text him or something like that to try to get him back on.
Yeah, it might be worth reaching out. And I know this is running a little longer here, but
yeah,
I think we've given some good feedback that's at verbal direction. In absence of another member, I don't think we can formally provide direction. Technically we're out of a quorum now, so I think we can continue some good discussion, or informally do something. But do you want to reach out to the other members and see what happens?
Yeah. I don't know. I'd have to scroll through, because I don't have Greg's number, I think, somewhere on me right now. So I'd have to do some really research on that. That could take some time, because I don't believe I have his number in my phone or anything. So my question, and Director DeAndrea, is that and I know you wanted the committee to do a motion on this evening. If we can't this evening, is it possible to do it at our next meeting? And if not, how can we do this otherwise? And if you need an answer before then.
Yeah, I think given the circumstances, so we really can't wait until next meeting. I think they want this input sooner.
Okay.
I believe we're going to talk about it on June 14th. So, and it's not a requirement that you do a motion. I think it was just preferred by finance so that it would be very clear. So I got enough direction. I will re-listen to the video and then summarize that and send it to finance, and then send it to all of you as well. So so that I accurately capture your thoughts. But I think, yeah, there's a good amount of discussion. I think everybody weighed in, including member Knudsen and member Lewis. So, or I guess maybe member Lewis didn't, but I will summarize your actions, and that should be okay for finance.
I guess I do have a request there, Director DeAndrea, in the future here, and maybe, this is a yearly thing that we're going to be doing as a committee. And so if it's possible, and you did provide us this presentation and everything in advance and doing that, it would almost, I think, maybe in the future, if we have just at least one more meeting previous to, prior to that, so we can have one meeting as a committee to say, hey, here's all of the list right here. What does, member Knudsen's on the line. I just saw he's raised his hand, so he's back on.
Maria, to Neil's point, receiving the materials ahead of time, there was a lot of line items and didn't quite know what was behind some of them. And so some of that context definitely helps in the way that I think about some of these things on here. And so I understand you guys have a cycle that you need to go through with certain timelines. And we, of course, have our meeting cycles, which may or may not align appropriately with the timeframes that you're working with as well. So, for something like this, I think maybe the committee would be open to maybe adjusting the meeting schedule a week or two, or, doing something, we can be creative about this, because I think everybody wants to provide good input on this. And we kind of need that context to know what's behind some of the numbers and then think about it a little bit. And that's kind of up to us. But I think that might be a process that could allow us to give the best feedback on some of these things without keeping everybody around for a long meeting sometimes. But I really appreciate you guys helping out and hanging. Yeah, well, and thank you guys for hanging around and talking through all this stuff too, because I know it's a lot, and you're doing it over and over with different groups too, I'm sure. So thank you.
Right. Yeah, I would absolutely be remiss in not, appreciate again everybody from the city staying on the line here and sorting this out. But as mentioned, I feel this action item is a tier 1 action item for ETAC, right? So it's quite important. And so to sit here and go through this presentation, and now, not having everyone here, including Member O'Connell and Member Lewis present, but also just for us, as Chris alluded to just say, if we had one meeting prior to be able to say, hey, this is a big ticket item here for ETAC, let's sort through this and really come up with your list. And then at what would have been possibly today's meeting, we could have very well at that time said, okay, we have our list amongst the group. And then from there, streamline that or refine that to what those would be. Because right now I feel like we're just deer in headlight kind of look, like, wow, we've got all of this, and trying to sort it out on the fly is quite a bit. And again, they all have merit to some degree as well too. So that being said, but we do have Member Canadison back on the line, and so we officially do have quorum again to be able to carry a motion on this.
So I have a suggestion here. I've got a relatively short list. If I'm allowed to share my screen, I could just put that up on the screen, and we've got 3 of us here. We can talk about if we want to change anything on this list, but we can use it to make the motion if that's okay with you, Neil, and Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
All right. Let's see what happens. Here we go. Can I pick a window? All right, you guys disappeared, but can you see my Microsoft Word document?
I could see it.
All right, so this was sort of generally the notes that I captured through our discussion. And I guess it's kind of up to the 3 of us here to add anything we want to add on the prioritize list or deprioritize, or I guess maybe a more general question to Mayor Pro Tem Sierra or Maria would this be enough to help you guys prioritize or deprioritize things, or are you looking for even more specific, all of these things, yes, no, up, down? I guess that's 2 questions. So
no, I think that's a great start, and I appreciate there's a lot of information there to sort through. So I don't think by saying that these are your 5 priorities that you're not saying that the others aren't in tier 1. So again, if these kind of the cream rises to the top, I think that's very appropriate to bring back to council. And I like the idea of maybe deprioritizing some too. So what's your top of the list, bottom of the list? I think that's good.
Okay. Yeah, my idea was these are, prioritize are things that we want to, put emphasis on or elevate, and deprioritize are things if you're trying to make a decision that weigh them a little less, the committee doesn't think those are as important as the things on the prioritized list. Otherwise, for me, the tiers seemed relatively appropriate. What do you guys think, Greg and Neil?
I do as well there too, Chris. Yeah, so I think what you've got so far there on your list, I'm pretty much in favor of all of that. The one that I'm curious about though is the deprioritizing the traffic signal replacement there too, because I'm and I'm not certain if there is a traffic signal or, or certain equipment that really needs to be at least maintained or updated, or however that would be, or if there's something that's in such disrepair that could become an issue. So I'm not certain on that one right there for deprioritizing.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
speak to that, and maybe Maria has a response as well. I saw that there was also some signal maintenance type of line items on here as well. But that was something that felt like could maybe be pushed off a year if we needed to wait another year to replace something. But I don't know if we have one that's rusted out and falling over, that's a safety hazard or something. I'd lean on the city to.
Yeah,
Mhm.
no, and that's the great part about is it 150 or 1,000 is that Chris is able to keep them going so that they don't get to the point where they're gonna fall over. So I think it is one of those things where, and we do have some poles that have some rust to them and we received some money through a budget supplemental to replace some of those in 2021. So I think some of our critical infrastructure is being addressed. And so, but it's one of those things where you kick the can too many years and then it's like it all kind of hits the prioritization at once. So we want to make sure it stays on the radar screen, but I would agree that it's not something that there's an imminent problem that we need to address with replacement.
So Neil, I don't know if that changes your opinion, or Greg. I'm happy to pull it off of the deprioritize and it can kind of stay where it is, but it was an expensive tier 1 item. So that's why it made it onto that list for me. What do you guys think?
I don't know if you could see that. Yeah, thumbs up for me on that too. So I would absolutely, and here's the thing. So Director DeAndrea, so if we as a committee go ahead and vote on, I guess, Chris's document here, if you will, do you need anything more specific to that, or would that suffice?
No, this is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it should be part of the record since I'm presenting. It's part of the recording, right?
Yeah, and I'll write this up essentially and send that to finance as well.
Director DeAndre, before we move on, just real quick, that Parks and Rec lot maintenance, isn't that their Parks and Rec's budget item? But they're basically doing like an intercompany transfer to us, so it wouldn't be appropriate for us to deprioritize that if they're giving us part of their budget dollars. Am I understanding that correct?
It's all part of the capital program, the capital improvement fund. So it is in that one fund.
Okay.
I don't know if they match it at all with operating dollars.
Right.
Maybe I can ask that question.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that would be my concern.
Okay.
That's a really interesting piece of information that I would have had no idea about. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, if that's part of a matching or some other budget, then and already included in some other things that are approved, I would have a hard time saying to deprioritize that. What else, guys? What do you think? Anything you guys want to add, remove?
You know, I just emphasized the Old Hampton corridor. So if that's on the list in terms of prioritizing and bumping that up to tier 1, that's where I'm at with that. Member Diedrich and members, ETAC members here. So I just see tremendous value in that corridor. And so that's where I'm pushing that to tier 1.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of really hard decisions. These all seem like important things. And, I feel like this is a good, this reflects my feelings as well. So thanks for pulling these together, Chris. Member Diedrich.
Mm-hmm.
Let's vote on it here. I make a motion to approve the list that is being shared with the committee right now to prioritize grant matching opportunities, 285, Broadway Bridge Enhancement, concrete utilities, city share, Old Hampton Corridor, and rail trail projects from the Capital Projects Public Improvement Fund presentation as presented by Director Andrea. And the committee recommends a lower prioritization of sign inventory, traffic signal replacement, Union Avenue repaving, and Parks and Rec lot maintenance, with the caveat on Parks and Rec lot maintenance being that if it's required for other department commitments, we do not recommend deprioritizing it. And that is the motion at hand.
Very good. Thank you, Member Diedrich. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second. Yep.
We do have a second. Any further discussion on this? I think we've discussed it, but any last comments? Please bring it to the floor. None at this time. Let's move forward with a vote.
Okay. Member Diedrich,
Aye.
Member Knudsen,
Aye.
Member Lewis, Member O'Connell, and Chair Sarno.
Aye.
That motion carries.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris, for keeping track of that for us too. Appreciate that. So that felt a little bit like herding cats, but I think we came around to really having a solid list there too. So appreciate that and having some consensus. So let's move on with I think that was it. We'll just move on to, I'll go back to that. All right. Chairperson's choice. I really don't have anything at this time other than one comment. I did notice that I believe it was on Logan, near between Cornell and I want to say Bates, between there, and there was some, I think, some patching, and it looked like, you know, one of those things where maybe if there's a water line or valve or something was in the street there, and they did an excavation there and patched it back, but the patch was poorly done. And so I don't know if maybe that was just a temporary thing for the day and they had to go back then the following day or next couple of days and they fixed it. I haven't been through there last couple of days, but I did notice it this last week. So if we can tend to that, because it was quite a bump there, and I do ride a motorcycle as well too, and that's just kind of one of those to where it's quite a bit annoying when you're just rolling along and unable to navigate around that kind of a bump there in the road. So just bringing that to the attention of the city on that. And for that fantastic intersection that we have now at Broadway and Floyd, if we're going eastbound on Floyd up the hill there, part of the striping that was done there, and you have some skipettes that transition through there. So that's looking a little bit wore, a little bit faded, and as expected, you know, with winter and the winter that we've had and everything like that. So I don't know if it's at some point the city can just refresh some of that to delineate that transition, because I think that's it's new, that intersection's new. We love it. I think everybody's really enjoying having that there. So just refreshing that would be a good one. So
yeah, Neil, we got a running list of locations, probably citywide. We're getting ready to ramp up our long line striping, so we will be touching up almost all the areas in the whole city, long line wise.
yeah, well, thanks for that, Chris. I just wanted to make sure that that was on the list. So
You bet.
all right, thanks. All right, that's it. So committee members' choice. Let's go with Member Knudsen.
Just a quick bit of feedback. One of my neighbors mentioned to me that they're really appreciative of, I guess, that the the corner at, I think it's Inca and Dartmouth, maybe, where the Dartmouth bike lanes end and then it connects into the trail that goes underneath Santa Fe. Just that corner had some really bumpy concrete, and maybe the street connection there just was really bumpy, and I guess it got replaced. And so they really appreciated that, and we're thankful to the city for noticing problems like that and taking care of them. So I just wanted to pass along that that gratitude from my neighbor. Thank you. That's all.
Thanks, Member Knudsen. Let's move on to Member Diedrich.
Thank you, Neil. Just a few things, mostly comments. I'll try and keep it pretty short here. I noticed at the corner intersection of Acoma and Cornell, block north of Broadway, Chick-fil-A, Kaiser kind of intersection there, the stop signs got changed. And that has had, from my observations, living very nearby there, a positive effect. And so was happy to see that come in. I wasn't sure, I was just kind of curious if the city had received any feedback about that since that change was made.
I haven't. I don't know if you have, Chris. No.
No.
All right, well, a lot of times with these things, no news is good news, so good. I did have a couple of neighbors that had mentioned it because they knew I was on the committee, and they were all in favor of it. So thank you guys for trying something else out there.
We did send out a notice, kind of a brief little notice, just letting people know, that was coming. So that might have helped, inform people about the pending change.
My next comment was about the block party trailer. I'd seen some advertisements, and I know that's sort of a feature that we have available. I wasn't sure if that was through Public Works or the Parks and Rec department. I kind of assumed it was through Public Works, but I was just kind of curious if there had been engagement on that, if that was something through your department.
No, it's actually their neighborhood resources coordinator, who is part of our communications group. So she can, when you email or go to that link on the city website, it'll actually put you in touch with her, and then she coordinates that, gets that out to you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Yeah, I wasn't sure if Public Works put out signs or something that you guys had to do, but if the trailer has cones to put at the end of the block or something, that's great. Then you guys don't have to do anything. So was just kind of curious about that. Thanks. And then the last thing, I got a street sweeping notice, and thank you guys for sending one of those out. And that's it for me.
All right, thanks, Member Diedrich. So even though that's not on here, I just always like to just make sure everybody speaks their piece. So Chris Groth, got anything else?
Let me finally unmute. No, I don't. I'll probably follow up with Maria on a couple items here so we can get some items addressed and looked at, but nothing for the committee.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
Director DeAndrea.
Yeah, just wanted to inform the group that Chris's group got that memorial sign installed at Tufts and Bannock. So, or was that Radcliffe and Bannock? So that's been installed within the last couple of weeks here.
Excellent. See, we'll keep you busy. We'll keep you fed there, Chris. So no problem on that. All right. Thank you for that. And then Mayor Pro Tem, any last comments?
Yeah, just one thing. Just I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but we're City Council is going to be going back to in-person meetings on June 7th, which obviously is that first Monday in June. One of the discussion points that we're probably going to be having here this coming week is when boards and commission can go back in person as well. I would not be surprised that obviously it would be, well, we would discuss it, but obviously you may be meeting in person next month as well. So, but I'll follow up with an email. I have Director DeAndre or somebody from staff follow up with the individual boards and commission groups, letting them know what we've decided. And that is all.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Mayor Pro Tem. Thanks everyone for for tonight's meeting. This has really kind of run on a little bit longer than usual, but a lot of really important information we've walked through. So thanks everyone, and get a good night's sleep, and we'll catch you next time. All right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.